My parents secretly spent weeks coordinating with my brothers to stand up and object at my wedding ceremony to humiliate my bride. So, at 6 a.m., on the day of the wedding, I moved the entire event to a new venue and let my toxic family show up to an empty room. My name is Liam. I'm 28 years old, and a few months ago, I pulled off the most stressful, chaotic, and ultimately satisfying vanishing act in the history of matrimony. I didn't just cancel my wedding, I relocated it, entirely behind my family's back, 6 hours before I was supposed to stand at the altar and say I do. To understand why I did something that sounds completely unhinged, you need to understand the deeply flawed dynamic I grew up with in Austin, Texas. We were the picture-perfect suburban family on paper. We had the big limestone house, the manicured lawn that was mowed twice a week, 2 parents who attended every PTA meeting, and 3 boys who played sports. My older brothers, Derek and Connor, were the main characters of our family. I was, for all intents and purposes, an NPC in my own home. Derek was the firstborn golden child. He was the star athlete, got a business degree from UT Austin, and landed a tech sales job making $180,000 a year right out of college. He could do absolutely no wrong. Connor was the middle child, the charismatic class clown who leaned hard into his role. He was the guy who could talk his way out of a fender bender and into a free steak dinner in the same afternoon. Everyone loved Connor because Connor made it impossible not to love him. Then there was me, the quiet youngest brother, the one my mother would introduce to her country club friends by saying, "And this is our youngest," with a vague wave of her manicured hand, treating me like a slightly disappointing houseplant she hadn't gotten around to throwing out. I'm not saying my parents didn't love me, but they loved me in a distracted, exhausted way. I learned early on that my parents' attention was a finite resource, and the tank was always empty by the time they got to me. When Derek turned 16, he got a brand new car. When Connor turned 16, he got Derek's old car, which was still incredibly nice. When I turned 16, I got a bus pass and a pat on the back. When I brought home a report card with straight A's, my dad would glance at it, say, "Good job, bud," and go back to watching the Cowboys game. When Derek brought home a B, in a prerequisite class, they took him out for a massive celebratory dinner at a high-end steakhouse. I didn't let it destroy me. I went to Texas State, got a degree in cybersecurity, and built a solid life for myself. I got a great job as a senior analyst, bought my own condo, and cultivated a group of friends who actually noticed when I walked into a room. And then I met Maya. Maya is a veterinary technician from Waco. She's 5'5", has curly brown hair, freckles across her nose, and possesses a laugh that makes you feel like you've known her your entire life. She volunteers at a local dog rescue, survives exclusively on iced coffee, and remembers the absolute smallest details about people. She's the kind of person who will listen to you mention a book in passing and then buy it for you 3 weeks later just because she thought you'd like it. I met her at a backyard barbecue hosted by a mutual friend, and by the time the sun went down, I was entirely gone for her. We dated for 2 years before I proposed on a quiet Sunday morning at Lady Bird Lake. She cried, I cried, and her rescue dog tried to eat the ring box. It was perfect. When I told my family we were engaged, the reaction was freezing cold. My dad gave me a stiff pat on the shoulder and said, "Hope you're ready for the financial burden." Derek smirked, leaned against the kitchen counter, and joked that I was locking her down before she realized her actual market value. Connor just gave me a thumbs up from the couch. But the real nightmare was my mother. She had decided, instantly, that Maya wasn't good enough for us. My parents aren't royalty, my dad sells corporate insurance and my mom is a retired real estate agent, but my mother acts like we're part of some elite Texas dynasty. Maya's parents ran a small HVAC business in Waco. In my mother's eyes, Maya was blue-collar, unrefined, and entirely unworthy of the family name she guarded so fiercely. The passive aggression was relentless. My mom would make pointed comments about Maya's clothes at family dinners, asking if she was going to wear that to a nice restaurant. She'd ask if Maya ever planned to get a real career instead of playing with stray mutts all day. Maya handled it beautifully. She'd smile, deflect the insult with a joke, and then quietly cry in the passenger seat of my car on the way home. I hated myself for not screaming at my mother, but a lifetime of being trained to keep the peace had paralyzed me. Confronting my family felt like trying to breathe underwater. When wedding planning started, it turned into an absolute war zone. My mom wanted a 250-person black tie event at her country club. Maya and I wanted an 80-person rustic wedding at a restored winery just outside of Austin. My mom tried to hijack everything. She tried to veto Maya's dress because it wasn't traditional enough. She tried to force us to use her caterer. I finally snapped at a Sunday dinner 4 months before the wedding. My mom made a snide remark about how Maya's family probably didn't understand the etiquette of hosting a proper event. I slammed my fork down, looked my mother dead in the eye, and told her that we were doing things our way, and if she couldn't be supportive, she could stay home. The table went dead silent. My dad stared at his plate. Derek rolled his eyes. Connor suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. My mom burst into theatrical tears, accused me of breaking her heart, and stormed out of the dining room. After that night, my family froze me out. Communication dropped to zero unless I initiated it. Family dinners became stilted, awkward affairs where everyone talked around me like I was a ghost. I naively told myself they'd get over it. I told myself that once the wedding day arrived, they would see how happy Maya made me and they would finally come around. I was an absolute idiot. Update 1. The rehearsal dinner went smoothly enough. My parents were frosty but polite. My brothers gave generic toasts that were mediocre but completely inoffensive. I went back to the hotel feeling a massive sense of relief. Maya fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted from the stress of the day. At 2:15 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was my cousin, Chloe. Chloe is my mom's sister's daughter, and she is the only person in my extended family who actually treats me like a human being. She's fierce, fiercely loyal, and she adored Maya from day one. Chloe is not a 2 a.m. caller. She is a phone on silent by 9:30 p.m. kind of person. When I saw her name glowing in the dark, my blood ran absolutely cold. I slipped out of bed, walked into the hotel bathroom, and answered the phone. Chloe? What's wrong? Her voice was trembling with rage. Liam, you need to sit down. I have to tell you something, and you cannot freak out until I finish. What happened? I asked. My heart hammering against my ribs. After you and Maya left the rehearsal dinner, your mom called an emergency family meeting in the hotel lobby, Chloe said, her breath hitching. She sat everyone down, your dad, Derek, Connor, Aunt Sarah, Uncle Dave. She had this whole speech prepared. She told them she couldn't in good conscience let this wedding happen without speaking up. She said Maya has manipulated you, isolated you, and is only marrying you for your tech salary. My stomach plummeted into the floorboards. What is she going to do? She wants the family to intervene during the ceremony, Chloe whispered. When the Reverend asks if anyone objects, your mother is going to stand up. Liam, she wrote a speech. She showed it to me on her iPad. It's 3 pages long. She plans to list all the reasons Maya is unfit for your family, right there in front of everyone. She genuinely thinks that once she lays it all out, you'll wake up and cancel the wedding on the spot. I couldn't breathe. The bathroom walls felt like they were closing in on me. Who else is in on this? That's the worst part, Chloe said, her voice breaking. Your dad agreed to back her up. Derek said he'd chime in because he thinks it'll be a good reality check for you. Connor didn't volunteer to speak, but he nodded along and didn't defend you. My mom tried to stop them, told them they were insane, but your mom shut her down entirely. They are going to ambush you at the altar, Liam. I thanked Chloe, hung up the phone, and slid down the bathroom wall until I was sitting on the cold tile. I felt like I was suffocating. My own family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, had spent the evening after my rehearsal dinner plotting to publicly humiliate the woman I loved on the most important day of our lives. This wasn't impulsive. This was a calculated, premeditated attack. I sat there in the dark for an hour. I thought about calling my mom and screaming at her. But she'd just cry, play the victim, and figure out a different way to ruin the day. I thought about canceling everything. But why should Maya lose her dream wedding because my family was a toxic nightmare? Maya had spent months picking out flowers, writing her vows on index cards, and dreaming of this day. I wasn't going to let them steal it from her. Then, at 3:30 a.m., a terrifyingly clear thought crystallized in my mind. A beautiful, absolutely unhinged idea. I wasn't going to cancel the wedding. I wasn't going to confront my family. I was going to move the entire wedding. Different venue, same day, same time. And I simply was not going to tell my family where it was. I walked back into the bedroom and gently shook Maya awake. She blinked at me, groggy and confused. Babe? What time is it? It's almost 4 a.m, I said quietly. I need you to listen to me. I told her everything. Every single word Chloe had said. The hotel lobby meeting, the 3-page speech, my dad's betrayal, and my brother's absolute complicity. I watched Maya's face transition from sleepy confusion to profound heartbreak, and finally, to a cold, calculated fury. Maya is a sweet person, but she's also a vet tech who wrestles angry 80-pound German shepherds for a living. She does not panic. When she gets quiet, she gets strategic. What are we doing? She asked, her voice dangerously calm. I want to change the venue, I said. Today. Right now. We move the wedding, and we don't tell my family. We let them show up to an empty room. Maya didn't even blink. She reached over, grabbed her phone from the nightstand, and said, I'm calling my mother. If you ever need to coordinate a Black Ops military extraction, hire a former PTA president from Texas. Maya's mom, Brenda, was awake by 4:15 a.m. By 4:30 a.m., she was in our hotel room with a legal pad, 3 different colored pens, and a terrifying glint in her eye. This woman had spent her entire life preparing for a crisis she could organize her way out of, and she was thriving. Right? Brenda said, clicking her pen. The original venue was the winery. We need a backup location immediately. I had one. My uncle Marcus, my dad's older brother, who was entirely estranged from my parents because he couldn't stand my mother's snobbery, owned a gorgeous 1.5-acre ranch out in the hill country. It had a massive covered pavilion, a small lake, and string lights strung through the oak trees. He had offered it to us months ago, but we'd politely declined to keep the peace with my mom. At 5:45 a.m., I called him. "Uncle Marcus? It's Liam. I know it's incredibly early, but is your ranch available today?" He sounded raspy and entirely confused. "Liam? Son, it's before dawn. Why? I need to move my wedding. I'll explain the details later, but my parents are planning to crash the ceremony and object to humiliate Maya." There was a long pause. Then, I heard the sound of a truck engine starting in the background. "I always said your mother was a snake." Marcus grunted. "Get your people out here. I'll fire up the smoker and get the pavilion cleared." By 6 a.m., the wedding was officially moved. The next 6 hours were a blur of adrenaline, black coffee, and pure spite. Brenda called the florist and calmly explained the situation. The florist was so scandalized by the gossip that she agreed to reroute the delivery for free. Brenda called the caterer, offered him an extra $300 in cash, and promised him leftover brisket from Marcus's smoker. He grumbled, but he was in. I grabbed my old phone, the one my family had the number for, and shoved it deep into my suitcase. I used Maya's backup phone to text every single guest who wasn't part of my immediate family. I sent a mass message: "Emergency venue change. Please see the new address below. Do not inform Liam's parents." At 12:30 p.m., guests started arriving at Uncle Marcus's ranch. It was breathtaking. The pavilion overlooked the water, Marcus's wife had set out dozens of folding chairs, and the Texas sun was shining beautifully. Everyone who arrived hugged me fiercely. Some looked at me with pity, but most looked at me with deep respect. My buddy Greg brought a cooler of beer and said, "Dude, this is either the best decision you've ever made or a complete disaster. Either way, I'm drinking." Chloe arrived at 1 p.m., looking absolutely exhausted. She practically tackled me. "Your mom texted me an hour ago asking if I was at the winery yet." Chloe laughed, wiping a tear from her eye. "I told her I was running late. She has no idea." At 2 p.m., the exact time the ceremony was supposed to start, I stood at the altar. Reverend Thomas, a family friend of Maya's who had taken the frantic 6 a.m. venue change completely in stride, smiled at me. The music started. Maya walked down the grassy aisle on her father's arm, wearing the dress my mother had hated, looking so beautiful it actually made my chest ache. When Reverend Thomas asked, if anyone can show just cause why they may not be lawfully joined together, let them speak now, there was only the sound of the wind in the trees and the distant chirp of birds. No speeches. No objections. No family intervention. Just peace. We said our vows, we exchanged rings, we kissed, and we were married. While we were taking our photos by the lake, Chloe got the full play-by-play from an aunt who had stayed behind to spy on the original venue. At 1:30 p.m., my mother, father, Derek, and Connor had arrived at the restored winery, dressed to the nines. My mother had her clutch purse tucked under her arm, presumably holding her 3-page manifesto. They walked into the venue and found nothing. No chairs. No flowers. No guests. No groom. My mom called my old phone 22 times. My dad called me 10 times. Derek sent a barrage of texts ranging from times, "Where the hell are you?" to times, "Mom is having a panic attack, call us right now." Connor sent one text that just said times, "bro." When it finally dawned on my mother that the wedding was happening somewhere else, and that she had been deliberately excluded, she completely lost her mind. According to the aunt, my mother stood in the middle of the empty winery courtyard in her $800 dress, her face red with rage, and screamed, "He will pay for this for the rest of his natural life." They never found us. We danced, we ate barbecue, we drank cheap beer, and we celebrated until midnight. It was the best night of my life. Update 2. Maya and I left for our honeymoon in New Orleans the next morning. I didn't turn my family phone back on until we were sitting in a cafe eating beignets on day 3. I had 147 unread text messages and 64 missed calls. I read exactly 0 of them, powered the phone back down, and ordered another coffee. When we got back to Austin a week later, the real war began. My mother had spent the entire week crafting a masterful victim narrative. She called every extended family member and family friend, sobbing hysterically. She claimed that Maya was an evil, controlling manipulator who had brainwashed me into abandoning my family on my wedding day. She conveniently omitted the part where she had written a literal manifesto to ruin the ceremony. But she underestimated Chloe. Chloe went on a scorched earth campaign. Whenever someone posted a vague, passive-aggressive status on Facebook about praying for family, Chloe was in the comments with timestamps, screenshots, and receipts. She told everyone exactly what my mother had planned. Within 2 weeks, the tide turned drastically. Half of my extended family stopped speaking to my parents. Maya and I sat down and decided on our boundaries. I wasn't going to cut my family off entirely, but I wasn't going to be a doormat anymore. I sent a group text to my parents and brothers. I kept it brief and clinical. I told them I knew about the planned objection. I told them that until I received a genuine, unreserved apology that specifically acknowledged their actions and included Maya by name, they were not welcome in my life. Derek was the first to react. He called me furious. "You embarrassed Mom in front of the whole family, Liam. You're acting like a child." She brought a 3-page speech to ruin my wedding, Derek, I replied coldly. And you were going to help her. Don't ever call my phone again unless it starts with an apology. I hung up. My mom's response came in the mail 3 days later. It was a 5-page handwritten letter. It was a masterclass in narcissistic deflection. She talked about how much she sacrificed for me, how her heart was broken, and how she only planned the intervention because she was terrified of losing her baby boy to the wrong path. She didn't use Maya's name once. She didn't apologize. She just justified her cruelty. I threw it in the shredder. Months passed. Maya and I settled into married life. We adopted a second rescue dog, a goofy golden retriever mix named Buster. I got a promotion at work. We hosted game nights. Life was incredibly peaceful without the constant weight of my family's expectations dragging me down. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, there was a knock on our door. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach drop. It was my dad. He looked soaked, exhausted, and about 10 years older than the last time I saw him. I opened the door. He stood on the porch, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. "Liam," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Can I please come in?" I looked back at Maya, who was sitting on the couch with Buster. She gave me a firm nod. "Come in, Dad." He walked into our living room, awkwardly taking off his jacket. He sat down in the armchair. Buster immediately trotted over and rested his wet chin on my dad's knee. Normally, my dad would shoo a dog away, but he just absent-mindedly stroked Buster's ears. He looked up at me, and then at Maya, and his eyes were completely bloodshot. "I am so sorry," he said. The words sounded like they physically hurt him to push out. "I am so deeply, incredibly sorry." He looked directly at Maya. "Maya, you have been nothing but wonderful to my son. You are kind, you are smart, and you make him happier than I have ever seen him. We treated you like garbage. What my wife planned to do at your wedding was despicable. And the fact that I stood by and agreed to participate makes me a coward. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I am ashamed of myself." Maya's eyes welled up with tears, but she held her ground. "Thank you for saying that," she whispered. Then my dad turned to me. "Liam, I failed you. I spent your whole life catering to your brothers because they were loud and demanding, and you were so self-sufficient I just assumed you didn't need me. I let your mother run roughshod over you because I was too tired to fight her. When she pitched that insane objection plan, I knew it was wrong. I knew it would destroy you, but I went along with it anyway because it was easier than dealing with her wrath. I traded your happiness for my own comfort, and it cost me my son." He put his face in his hands and started to sob. My stoic, emotionally repressed Texan father was crying in my living room. I didn't immediately forgive him, but I thanked him for his honesty. We talked for 3 hours that night. He told me that the house had become a nightmare. My mother was doubling down on her delusion, refusing to admit any wrongdoing, and it was tearing their marriage apart. He also told me about Derek. Apparently, Derek's wife had caught wind of the full story from Chloe. She cornered Derek, threatened to pack her bags, and told him that if he ever pulled a stunt like that, she'd divorce him before the ink was dry. Derek was terrified. Sure enough, Derek called me a week later. His apology was gruff, awkward, and heavily motivated by fear of his wife, but he admitted he was a jerk and promised to back off. Connor, typical Connor, sent us a $300 espresso machine with a note that said, "Sorry things got weird. Love you, bro." It was a weak apology, but it was exactly what I expected from him. My mother, however, remains a stone wall. It's been 8 months since the wedding, and she hasn't reached out once. According to my dad, she still firmly believes she is the victim of a cruel, manipulative son and his wicked wife. She would rather sit alone in her giant, quiet house with her pride than admit she was wrong and have her family back. And the craziest part? I'm okay with that. For 28 years, I twisted myself into knots trying to earn the love and approval of a woman who was fundamentally incapable of giving it to me unless I was playing by her rigid, toxic script. Moving my wedding was the most terrifying thing I've ever done, but it broke the spell forever. I don't need her approval anymore. I have a wife who looks at me like I hung the moon. I have a dad who comes over every Sunday morning to drink coffee and throw tennis balls for my dogs. I have a life that is entirely, completely mine. Sometimes, the best way to win a rigged game is to just flip the board and walk away. And if they want to scream about it, let them scream to an empty room. I paid for my parents and sister to attend my wedding, but they never came. I exposed the truth and watched their lives fall apart. It said, "Your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life, a beautiful whirlwind of flowers and laughter and love. When I began to plan mine, that's what I had in mind. I reserved the space in advance. I discovered a little but lovely establishment that wasn't very costly. Fairy lights hanging in a rooftop garden. I made sure there were vegetarian selections for my sister, and champagne for my mother, when I carefully chose the menu. To make it simpler for my family to attend, I even rescheduled the wedding to be closer to my hometown. I trusted them when they stated they couldn't afford it. I did, of course. I volunteered to assist. I went over everything with them when they were still hesitant. Hotel rooms, flights, and clothes. I covered everything, including my sister's husband's, so she wouldn't have to go alone. I convinced myself that it was worthwhile. When it counts, that family is there. I was still unaware that for them, simply showing there meant something much different than it did for me. I got up early the morning of the wedding. My best friend with whom I grew up texted me to let me know that he and his partner had landed safely. We used to trade Pokemon cards on the sidewalk. They had paid for the motel and purchased their own tickets. Just glad to be there, no drama. For my parents' flight, I kept refreshing the airline app in the interim. Arrived on schedule. Well, I thought, they will arrive soon. As a nervous adolescent waiting for a date, I waited in the dressing room, looking out the window every few minutes. When the officiant arrived at 3 o'clock, she smiled softly and asked if we were ready. I said, "We might need a few more minutes. They may have encountered traffic. Their phones may have died." I made a call, directly to voicemail. Called once more, no response. My hair was completed by the makeup artist. My bouquet was laying by the window when the photographer took these gentle pictures. I gave the camera a smile. I looked at my phone once more. Nothing has changed. My best friend leaned inside and knocked softly around 3:30. "They're asking if you want to start." My throat constricted as I gazed at him. I was to be escorted down the aisle by my father. He pledged. I forced a painfully wide smile and replied, "Let's just give it 5 more minutes." He pretended not to see my trembling hands, nodded, and waited with me. I gave another call. Voicemail. At 3:37, my phone finally rang. Mom's phone number. I nearly dropped it since I grabbed it so quickly. "Oh, hi, sweetie," said my mother. "Sorry, we couldn't make it." I blinked, unable to comprehend. What? What took place?" She chuckled as if I were being foolish. "Your sister's brother-in-law had a poetry reading. It was important to him and she didn't want to go alone. We had to support her. You know how family is." I remained silent. She brightened the stillness. "You understand, right?" My father's laughing voice could be heard in the background. "Maybe next time." I was trying to comprehend that my parents had selected a poetry reading for my wedding, as I stood there in my wedding gown, makeup applied, flowers in hand. Not even her reading of poetry. Her brothers of her husband. Nor had they bothered to inform me. They simply let me wait. Let me get into a panic. Just until the music should have started, let me imagine that they were lost, injured, or en route. They allowed me to cover all costs. To make things easy for them, I'll move the entire wedding, but it won't be significant enough. I put my phone away at 3:45, and took a deep breath. There was still my best friend, there silently, ready to grab me if I fell. "Would you," I said, my voice breaking, "walk me down?" He grinned, without hesitation. "Of course." So I walked hand in hand with the lad, who used to construct tree forts with me in the backyard, and who, when my sister laughed too much to assist, once sewed a Barbie dress with me. The ceremony continued. Vows were exchanged. The rings were switched. People cheered and applauded. There was a cry. Through it all, I grinned. I grinned till my cheeks hurt. I smiled till I lost all sense of reality. Jokes at the reception made me laugh. The cake was cut by me. Under the string lights I had strung myself, I danced with my new husband. Something cold and hard settled deep into my chest. I went to the little desk by the window later that evening, after everyone had gone home, and the hotel room door had softly clicked shut behind us. I opened my laptop and sat down. Still wearing his suit jacket, my husband walked carefully across the room. He questioned, "Are you sure you want to do this?" With my fingers already tapping the computer, I nodded without turning to face him. "Yes." After a moment of hesitation, he remarked quietly, "You know, once you send it, There's no undo button. At that moment, I glanced up, gave him my full attention, and smiled for the first time that day. Everything is different tomorrow. I didn't turn around after hitting submit. It said that on your wedding night, you shouldn't reflect on the past. It is expected of you to look forward. Hope, new beginnings, and fresh beginnings. I made an effort. However, I couldn't help but think of my sister even as I cuddled up on my husband's side under the thick hotel blankets. As well as the years that preceded this. I was 3 planets away from my sister, who was 3 years older. In high school, she was the type of person who everyone wanted to be around. The one with the name-brand clothes, the glossy hair, and the easy chuckle that made you feel like you should be thankful for the opportunity to be beside her. She wasn't nice. Not to those who weren't a good fit. Not to those like me. I used to witness it in the corridors of the school. Here's a small smirk. There was a whisper behind his hand. At times, it was clear. When a person wearing shoes from a thrift store passed by, there was a loud false cough. At times, it was so informal and well-practiced that you hardly noticed. However, I took note. When she laughed at me, I also noticed it. Her parents referred to her as selective. They said she had standards. My mother once said, "You can't expect her to be friends with just anybody," as I sobbed after being excluded once more. My father went on to say, "You need to toughen up. Not everyone's cut out to be popular." As if I were to blame for not being as brilliant as she was. She wasn't like me. It was sufficient that I have a few close buddies. I didn't require attention. Growing up, my best friend lived next door. We built Lego towns and made up stories about superheroes who baked cookies instead of saving the world on more afternoons than I could remember. He excitedly brought over a doll he had won at a carnival when we were 8 years old, and we gave it the name Captain Sprinkles. It was the funniest thing ever, in my opinion. My folks didn't. My dad once said, "Boys like that usually turn out funny." Loud enough for me to hear. "It's no surprise that he prefers dolls to football," my mother joked during supper. It seemed nonchalant and dismissive, as if they were making a weather-related remark, rather than angry. Their sadness was not concealed. Not when I choose my quiet, eccentric pals. Not when I liked reading more than wearing cosmetics. Not when my sister left for another glitzy party and I stayed at home making posters for the science fair. I believe they suddenly stopped having high expectations of me and began having high expectations of her. My sister became their prize when we were teenagers. Queen of homecoming. Most likely to be successful. Every accomplishment she made was hailed as a badge of honor. Every act of brutality she committed was dismissed as a natural part of maturing. My parents hardly batted an eye when they discovered that she had been so severely bullying another daughter that she had changed schools. Saying, "Teenage drama. Girls are mean sometimes. It's normal." They hardly acknowledged my academic scholarship to a nearby college. No notification to the neighbors. No brunch. My mother remarked, "Well, you always were the quiet one," with a hazy smile that seemed to explain everything. I was already learning something significant at the time, but I was unaware of it. Love in our household was conditional. For her it was loud, but for me, it was silent. Performances, not perseverance, were the reason it appeared. And they stopped paying any attention to me when I quit entertaining them. The divide only grew wider as we grew older. Life seemed to be a stage that was made just for my sister. Internships she was not compensated for. Jobs she left behind. But the net was always there, regardless of how many times she fell. My parents are congratulating her, supporting her, and offering their apologies. I worked in the interim. I worked nights. I packed orders for my small internet business. Conveniently forgetting that I paid half of the mortgage. I paid the rent when they said I was fortunate to live at home. After that, I met my husband one summer. He was grounded, a couple of years older, and the first person I hadn't seen through my sister in a long time. He inquired about my work rather than hers. He didn't interrupt me. Instead, he listened when I spoke. He gave me hope that I might be sufficient. Just like me. I went down hard. I saw that when my sister first met him. The flash of curiosity, as fast as a flash on a camera. Her smile widened. When she laughed, she leaned a bit too near. She used to twirl her hair when she was attracted to someone. She later attempted to run into him without my presence. Still later, she sent him a message. A casual, Well-practiced offer to hang together without the younger sister accompanying. Nothing particularly scandalous. That should have been the end of it once he declined courteously. However, it wasn't. She sobbed as she went to our parents a few weeks later, claiming to have been wronged. Her words, "I saw him first. It's not fair." She was already seeing someone else, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter that he had never been hers in the first place. In our family, performance was more important than reality. Since she was upset, I was the bad guy. "Maybe you should think about your sister's feelings for once," she suggested to me. "Family is more important than some boy." My father concurred. Nobody inquired about my feelings. Nobody gave a damn. Her marriage was her fallback option. He was well off, reliable, and extremely giving. Ideal if the correct last name on wedding invitations was more important to you than true love. But she never stopped talking behind closed doors. I settled. He's boring but rich. He thinks he won the lottery. Poor guy. I listened to everything. The banter and the casual brutality. She had extramarital affairs. Sometimes after a few beers she boasted about it. My parents dismissed it with a laugh. My mother once said, "Marriage is complicated," while gesturing with her palm. Adding, "Boys are fragile," my father said. "Let her have her fun." I wasn't going to be the quiet one tidying up her mess though. This time. Someone has to know the truth this time. Someone who wasn't worthy of being silently humiliated in private, like I had been for years. Perhaps it wasn't retaliation. Perhaps it was a show of solidarity. Perhaps I was just picking the side that no one else had ever picked for once. I shut down the laptop and inhaled deeply. I wasn't going to apologize this time, and tomorrow would be different. My phone was buzzing against the nightstand when I woke up, as if it were trying to get out. I was still sleepy when I opened one eye to see the stack of missed calls. 6 from home, 3 from my mother's phone, and 2 from a number I didn't recognize but felt bad about. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned over, covered my head with the blanket, and listened to the quiet hum of the motel air conditioner. The new law of life: they can SMS if it is sufficiently urgent. The text did indeed follow. "Call us now." "What did you do?" "Fix this. We need to talk." Without even reading the rest, I placed the phone face down on the nightstand. My spouse was stirring across the room, shirtless, hair disheveled, his wedding ring gleaming in the morning light. He muttered, "Everything okay?" "Family's in crisis," I admitted while dozing off. "It must be Tuesday." With a snort, he covered his head with the blanket. The first concrete hint of what was going on came to me around mid-morning. My relative, who was as socially conscious as a wet sponge, texted me. "Yo, heard your sister's husband dipped." Crazy. Family's freaking out. Dipped. To put it that way was one way. Over the course of the following few days, pieces gradually came in, resembling a jigsaw puzzle that is disorganized and has half of its pieces missing. It appears that my sister's husband had viewed the message I sent, or rather, the compilation of screenshots, recordings, and evidence, after the poetry reading. Evidence that his wife, whom he had helped through her resignations from employment, her breaking of leases, and her unfulfilled goals, had never appreciated him, had made fun of him, and had cheated on him. I had heard that there had not been an immediate screaming match. Nothing but quiet. A prolonged, perilous stillness. The kind where the actual harm was not yet apparent. The fallout became apparent in a matter of days. There was no big show when my sister's spouse moved out. By the end of the week, the divorce documents were filed. The invisible safety net my parents had never acknowledged they needed vanished along with him. He ceased making payments to my parents' company. Stopped making payments on their mortgage when unforeseen costs arose. Ceased offering courteous justifications for their inability to pay their bills in full on schedule. It was as if someone shut off a faucet from which they had been drinking without even realizing it. I took my own discreet actions. Canceled the temporary automatic payments that I had put in place 2 years prior. The ones that covered their emergency dental care, a portion of their utilities, and the cosign I created for their vehicle lease. Disconnected my accounts. My name was taken off the joint emergency fund. Moved my own funds to a more secure location where I wouldn't feel bad about utilizing them. I kept it a secret. No major altercations, just a silent disappearance. Financial ruin is a phenomenon that doesn't happen all at once. It seeps. Initially, credit card minimums are overlooked. The business invoices are then paid after the fact. Then, rather of sending courteous reminder emails, suppliers begin calling. The bank then regretfully notifies you that your request for a second line of credit was denied. Just as they had allowed their treatment of me to fester over the years, it was a gradual and agonizing process. Little betrayals, insults, and neglects added up until the foundation as a whole collapsed. I would often sit with it in the nights. The quiet, the lack, the odd pain of releasing oneself from something you've been pursuing your entire life. I had always imagined that it would be like falling off a cliff if I ever truly let go of my parents. It didn't. My ankle felt as though a weight had been unclipped. I wasn't going to fall. I was adrift. However, that did not negate the pain. There were quiet times when the grief struck more forcefully than I had anticipated. For example, when I was writing thank you notes to visitors, I thought of sending one to my parents out of habit before realizing they hadn't been present. Or when I saw a small Mother of the Bride frame in a store, and my hand grabbed out instinctively, foolishly, as if it still thought the appropriate people had given a damn. Another instance was when a stranger grinned at my spouse and me and remarked, "You must have such supportive families." And I had to chuckle because my family only had their own egos to uphold. When you survive individuals like that, you develop a certain kind of humor that becomes ingrained in your bones. Not the kind that makes you laugh aloud. Drained, exhausted, of course they did type. It's the kind of coffee you drink in a crummy diner at 2 a.m, just relieved to be somewhere else. Other adjustments also occurred. Quiet ones. I became pregnant about 2 weeks after the wedding. In the little hotel bathroom, with my back against the wall, and my heart pounding somewhere close to my ears, I gazed at the test. There was no plan. Just earlier than we anticipated. But not exactly unanticipated either. The world skewed slightly around me as I sat there for a long time, palms flat against the chilly tile. The only thing my husband did when I told him was grin, pull me in and say, "We're ready, you're ready." And I believed him for the first time in a long time. I kept my folks in the dark. Not even when the emails and texts began to come in. Certain news isn't the property of those who wouldn't be pleased for you. Some achievements are too valuable to give to others who merely want to use them as leverage. Their circumstances deteriorated in the meanwhile. I wasn't deaf, but I also didn't seek out updates. Cousins engaged in gossip. Curious texts were delivered by old neighbors. The long-muted family group chat was alive with secondhand anxiety. Revenue for businesses fell. A few sellers withdrew from sales. Bills were piling up. Smaller payments were first missed, followed by larger ones. It was not yet dramatic. There had been no court dates or foreclosure notices, but the strain was mounting like a little break in glass. They never arrived at my door. Not quite yet. Later, when situations worsened to the point that panic overcame pride, that would happen. But occasionally, I questioned whether they were taken aback. The calm one didn't fold, which surprised me. They had never realized how much they had depended on the phantom daughter. On the evenings when I sat at the kitchen table, I considered that. In front of me was the paperwork for the new house. With our feet intertwined beneath the chair, my spouse was looking through listings. On some nights, my dearest friend from childhood would phone. We chuckled at the time we unintentionally flooded his garage while attempting to construct a water slide, and chatted about the old neighborhood. After the baby was delivered, half-serious arrangements were made to travel. Neither did he inquire about my parents. He didn't have to. The problem with true family was that they were aware of when survival depended on silence. It became evident that things were getting out of my parents' hands by the end of the 3rd month following the wedding. For some reason, their company's temporary shutdown for renovations never ended. Under the guise of downsizing for retirement, their house was discreetly put up for preliminary offers. People began to take notice. The invitations ceased. The pitying glances began. Just a quiet, steady unraveling. No big confrontations, no screaming bouts. Similar to how they had eroded my trust in them over a lifetime. And I drifted farther and farther away each day. Not tumbling. Flying. It was raining the day they arrived. Not a romantic, sweet drizzle. The kind of rain that makes you question whether you should prepare an ark in case it happens, and slam sideways on windows. Really, it fits. The doorbell rang just as I was folding little onesies with soft gray, mint green, and tiny yellow stars. Not once. 5 times quickly, as if someone's entire palm was holding the button down. The sound made my husband freeze. The two of us exchanged glances across the kitchen. We were aware already. Through the peephole I took a quick look. They were there. At their feet were stacks of suitcases, jackets that are soaked, tight, angry grins. My sister and my parents. Like a threat, 3 faces I hadn't seen in months pressed themselves against the doorway. I took a while to open it, simply stood inhaling deeply while pressing his forehead against the soft wood. My spouse approached me from behind and placed a supporting hand on my back. Silently, "We can call now," he said. "Not yet," I said in a whisper. "Some things you have to see for yourself before you set them on fire." Without even saying hello, they shoved me when I eventually opened the door. Water from the rain trickled down the hardwood floor. In the center of the living room, my sister dropped her duffel bag. As if he owned the TV, my dad positioned himself next to it. My mother nodded tightly, as if she were anticipating tea service. My dad said, "We're not leaving," in a firm voice. My mother also said, "Not until you fix this." With an oddly quiet heartbeat, I carefully closed the door behind them. They jumped right in. A full-scale assault. They wanted me to give my sister's husband a call, tell him that I had lied, and explain that it was all jealousy, miscommunication, and a spiteful, nasty hoax. "You ruined our lives," my mother yelled aggressively. My father went on to say, "You embarrassed this family," my sister yelled. "If it's the last thing you do, you're going to fix this." In a tangle of fear, despair, and rage, their voices surged above one another. I let it pass over me as I stood there. At the time, I wasn't their daughter. I was a transaction, a duty. They kicked a broken vending machine in the hopes that the candy would still fall out. My dad made it official at one time. "If you won't help, we're staying here until you do." Daring me to dispute, he crossed his arms. My mother began discussing room division while he sat heavily on the couch. As if this had already been determined, my sister walked off toward the guest bedroom while pulling her luggage. Quietly I laughed. It was ridiculous, not because it was humorous. Because they hadn't been listening if they believed that I was still the girl who would allow them to enter and take control. Simply, "You're trespassing," I said. As if I had uttered a foreign language, they blinked at me. My mother remarked, "You invited us," in an overly high voice. Calmly, "I didn't even tell you where I lived," I said. Behind me, my husband had already started dialing. I caught him talking to someone in that courteous, business-like voice he reserved for important matters. My father moved forward, menacing. "You don't call the police on your family." "Funny," I responded with a flimsy smile. "I thought the family didn't abandon you on your wedding day." Heavy and unsightly silence. I saw my mother's face flash with genuine dread for the first time. It took very little time. After 15 minutes, someone knocked on the door. 2 cops who are courteous and professional. I just pointed, gave my ID, and displayed the lease agreement with just my husband's and my names on it. I didn't have to say much. My sister and parents were asked to leave by the cops, allowed them time to quietly pack up. Naturally, my sister yelled at me, accusing me of being callous and ruining the little family I still had. My mother sobbed. Threats were whispered beneath his breath by my father. However, they eventually departed, carrying their drenched bags back into the rain, while being watched calmly by 2 extremely patient police officers. I collapsed onto the couch, suddenly worn out, as the door closed behind them. My spouse sat next to me, warm and quiet. Like a reminder, the baby gave a little kick. Now, this, not them, is family. We moved again later. Discovered a home further away, nearer to the lifestyle we truly want. We did not send out a change of address. Few people were aware of our location. Occasionally my best friend and his partner would come over with amusing presents and tales of their travels and late-night dining in other locations. The life with my parents that I had dreamed of. Simple, encouraging, and unrestricted. I constructed it somewhere else. I made it better. I heard the fallout from mutual acquaintances and distant cousins. My parents' beloved home, which they had boasted about, sold at a loss. The company has left. Accusing everyone but herself, The sister who was always too good for punishment is now crashing on couches. I didn't make contact. Not after the divorce was declared final. Not at the time of filing for bankruptcy. Not when all the posts on social media vanished like wine poured on a dusty floor. I had believed that cutting them off would be like losing a limb or ripping something out of myself. However, it didn't. It was like the first time you realized you were never broken and got to your feet. All along you were simply seated in the wrong spot. The little mint green onesie is still folded and stashed in a drawer. The first one I purchased. The one about which I was terrified to speak. The one for which I at last understood that I didn't require their approval. My child will never grow up believing that love must be earned by doing good deeds. In his own house, she will never feel inferior. She will understand the true meaning of family. The nicest part is that they won't even be aware of her name. I question whether I went too far at times. If it was truly important to transmit that message, cut them off, and contact the cops. But then I remember who I was as a girl. The one who continued to be tolerant. The person who never gave up. I also understand that I didn't go very far. They simply never imagined that I would go anyplace. However, I would be interested in hearing your thoughts. Did I make the correct decision? Tell me in the comments below. Additionally, remember to hit subscribe if you would like to hear more stories like this one. Thanks for watching and sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next drama-filled episode. I came back from a business trip to find my sister and her kids in my apartment. When I asked them to leave, my whole family criticized me. Hello everyone. The tale of the day will astound you, but quickly, if you like this content, please click the subscribe button. Recently the channel has been a little quiet, but your support keeps it continuing. Let's get started. I'm a 28-year-old man who has spent the last 3 years living in my own apartment. I've always cherished my independence and personal space, and I work in software development. I went on a business trip 2 weeks ago to meet with clients all around the nation. When I departed, everything was as usual. My flat was spotless, well kept, and just the way I wanted it. After I returned, everything changed. Tired from traveling, I unlocked my door to discover my sister Sarah, 25F, and her 3 children, ages 3, 5 and 7, had moved into my house. I'm not referring to a couple bags for a quick trip. I'm referring to changed furniture, toys all over the place, kids' clothes in my spare bedroom, and food in my refrigerator that I most surely didn't purchase. I briefly believed I had entered the incorrect apartment. "Oh, you're back," my sister replied nonchalantly, as if this were absolutely normal, as she left the bathroom without even noticing me. I stood there, key still in hand, too astonished to answer. "Mom said you'd be home today." As I tried to comprehend what was occurring, the children ran over, thrilled to see their Uncle James. My private area, my apartment, had been totally overrun. When I eventually managed to speak, I questioned, "What the hell is going on?" Sarah clarified that she needed a temporary place to stay because she had been experiencing problems with her landlord. She apparently got permission from her parents to use my flat while I was abroad. She went on, "They said you wouldn't mind," as though that resolved the issue. I was enraged. I hadn't received a call. No one had sent a text. No one had considered asking the renter if it was acceptable to transfer a whole family into his unit. I called my parents right away, and I was even more irate after hearing their response. "Oh, James. I'm glad Sarah found a place to stay." My mom's landlord was being utterly irrational. My dad called me and told me that I was being self-centered, and that family helps family when I brought up the fact that they had allowed my sister to enter my apartment without my consent. He reminded me that helping my sister wouldn't kill me, and that I had all that extra room. I clarified that I pay a lot of money for my flat, because I want privacy. When I'm not traveling, I work from home, and having 3 children would make it impossible. In addition, my lease expressly forbids having long-term visitors without informing management. "Well, she's already settled in," was their reply. "You can't simply throw her out." I can, in fact. They treated me as like I was the irrational one for demanding my personal space back, even though it's my apartment. The children have been informed by Sarah that they will be staying with me for some time, and she didn't give me a direct response when I asked her what that meant. She replied she's researching her choices but hasn't taken any firm action when I questioned her about her plans to find a new location. Sarah and the kids have taken up my bedroom and the spare room, so I'm currently sleeping on my own couch. Now my neatly arranged apartment is in disarray. Everywhere you look you can find toys. I have no privacy, and the kids are noisy from the early hours of the morning till evening. I've given Sarah a week to come up with a different plan. I don't understand how it's reasonable to ask me to give up the apartment I pay for without even consulting my parents. Yet they think I'm being unkind. Am I being self-centered here? How can I regain my privacy without causing a family emergency? Update. The key that was not permitted. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who supported and commented on my first post. It made me feel less insane for being angry about this circumstance. Since my last post, things have become worse. I spoke with Sarah directly after several of you recommended that I find out how she entered my flat in the first place. She didn't break in, it turns out. She received a key from my parents. Yes, it is what you read. My parents reportedly chose to give my sister the extra key to my apartment, which they kept for emergencies only, without telling me. They responded angrily when I confronted them about this. My mother remarked, "We knew you'd make a big deal out of it." My father dismissed my worries, saying I was overreacting, and that it's not like anything bad happened. Sarah needed help and you were away. What were we supposed to do? Let her and the kids be homeless? I pointed out that there were plenty of other options, that they could have let her stay with them, helped her find temporary housing, or at the very least called me to ask permission before letting her into my home. However, things have happened. I've been cleaning my apartment and found a number of missing or damaged items, along with a broken set of expensive noise-canceling headphones, stains on my couch that weren't there before, a signed baseball I had on display in a case, and my PlayStation and 3 games. Someone used markers to draw on my bedroom wall, and when I questioned Sarah about it, she became defensive, saying that she had no idea what the PlayStation or baseball were about, that the headphones were probably already broken, and that the stains and the wall artwork were just children being kids. My costly sheets, which I specifically purchased because they help me sleep better, are stained with what appears to be juice or Kool-Aid. Sarah's response: "They'll wash out. Stop being so materialistic. This is more than just a privacy invasion." I later found out that the kids had been sleeping in my bed while I was away. Now it's about respecting my property and boundaries. I've told Sarah that the 1-week deadline still applies. I've made it clear to my parents that they will never again have access to my apartment, and I've changed the locks, which I paid for myself, even though the landlord offered to split the cost after I explained the situation. The narrative has somehow turned into that I'm the villain in this story, because I want my own space back, and I'm upset about my possessions being damaged or missing. But I'm standing firm. This is my apartment. My parents are now giving me the silent treatment, and Sarah has been telling family members that I'm throwing her and the kids out on the street. I've offered to help Sarah find a new place and even lend her money for a security deposit, but I'm not going to back down on the deadline. These are my belongings, and I have every right to be upset about what happened. I'll provide another update at the end of the week. Update: the damage report and missing valuables. I wish I had better news to share. It's been 4 days since my last update. The PlayStation and games that went missing, Sarah lent them to her current boyfriend without asking me, the autographed baseball that was missing from its case. I've done a more comprehensive inventory of my flat, and found that the damage and missing things are worse than I first believed. When I opened the desk drawer where I keep important documents, I found a small lockbox with $500 in cash. My emergency fund was empty, and when I confronted Sarah about it, she admitted that she borrowed the money because she was short on cash and promised to reimburse me as soon as possible. However, one of the kids took it outside to play with, and it's now lost somewhere in the neighborhood park. I've taken pictures of everything and made a comprehensive list of the missing and damaged items totaling almost $2,000. I sent this list to Sarah and my parents, making it clear that I expect reimbursement, but they didn't provide a timeline or acknowledge the seriousness of taking money that wasn't hers. Their answers were predictable. The deadline I set is coming up, and Sarah hasn't tried to find other housing. Instead, she's intensified her efforts to make me feel bad by using the children as emotional leverage. Sarah says she doesn't have that kind of money right now, and my parents accused me of nickel and dimming my own sister during a trying time. Where are we supposed to go? The smallest of her children began to cry when she asked this question in front of them. Additionally, I now know more about her housing circumstances. Despite what my parents suggested, she was not homeless. Due to months of non-payment of rent, she was forced to leave her previous flat. This isn't an emergency, even though my parents provided financial support throughout that period. Everyone expects me to correct the cycle of recklessness that has culminated in this situation. The atmosphere in the flat has gotten even more heated. Apparently, as a form of retaliation for my insistence that the children go, Sarah has ceased cleaning up after them. Toys are all over the place, dishes are heaped in the sink, and the bathroom has been transformed into something I never would have imagined in a matter of days. I've tried setting limits by locking the door to my home office throughout the day, but the kids keep yelling for me and hammering on the door, which interrupts my business calls. Sarah doesn't try to reroute them, or show any consideration for my work schedule. Sarah had earlier complained that I wasn't helping her find a boyfriend in my apartment with food. So last night things reached a climax, when I got back from grabbing takeaway for myself. I'd only met this man twice, but he was sitting on my couch, sipping my beer, and behaving as though he lived there. Sarah accused me of being domineering when I protested his presence, claiming that I had no right to govern her social circle. I reminded her that I have complete control over who is allowed inside my house as the legal tenant. After a heated argument, her partner left, but not before accusing me of being true to your own blood. Other family members have now been recruited by my parents to exert pressure on me. 2 aunts, an uncle, and even my grandmother have called to remind me that family comes first, and that I should be more sympathetic to Sarah's plight. I've discussed the matter with my landlord, and he's been surprisingly understanding. He acknowledged that it is against the conditions of my lease to have an undeclared residence, but he stated he would be accommodating given the situation. Even though Sarah is not listed on the lease, he has also hinted that we could have to start formal eviction procedures if she doesn't want to vacate. Though I'm praying it doesn't happen, I'm getting ready in case it does. 3 days remain till the deadline. After it passes, I'll provide another update. Update: family repercussions and eviction proceedings. As many of you anticipated, Sarah didn't try to leave or even explore for other lodging when the deadline drew near. Rather, she firmly asserted that she was aware of her rights, and that I was not allowed to evict her without giving her enough notice. Despite not actually being a renter, it appears that she has been receiving counsel regarding her rights. I formally gave Sarah a written notice with 30 days to leave the property after speaking with my landlord and a friend who is a lawyer. To ensure that there would be no doubt as to whether she received it, I personally handed this to her and sent it to her via certified mail. She laughed in my face in answer. She remarked, "Good luck with that." When my parents learned about the official notice, they became enraged and said, "I'm not going anywhere." My father yelled at me over the phone, saying that I was ruining the family and that he had raised me better. Taking a different tack, my mother called me in tears to express her disappointment and her inability to comprehend her own son prioritizing paperwork before family. They both declined to take Sarah and the children in. When Sarah's ex-husband, who is also the father of her children, got in touch with me, I realized that things had taken an unexpected turn. Sarah had apparently informed him that the children would be staying with my parents, rather than in my apartment. He was unhappy with the state of affairs and worried about his children's living circumstances. He said he had been attempting to acquire greater custody anyhow, and after hearing the whole tale, he offered to take the kids full-time until Sarah gets permanent home. Sarah went utterly crazy when she learned that I had spoken to her ex. She said I tried to take her children away and went behind her back. I no longer felt safe living in my own apartment because of her nasty behavior. While I continue to pay my rent, I have temporarily moved in with a buddy. Yesterday was the most startling development. I received a call from my landlord alerting me to a loud complaint coming from my apartment. He went to look into it and discovered that, in addition to Sarah, her children, and her boyfriend, there were 2 other people, friends of hers, who had evidently moved in as well. This was my landlord's last straw. Now that formal eviction procedures have been started against Sarah for being an unauthorized occupant, he is entirely in favor of them. We must follow the correct legal procedures as she has established residency by remaining there. However, the lawyer for my landlord is trying to get things forward as quickly as possible. I've told Sarah that I won't take legal action for the damages and stolen goods if she vacates the property before the eviction is completed. If not, I'm willing to sue her for the entire sum in small claims court. Now, instead of being angry, my parents are trying to negotiate. In order to allow Sarah time to find a place without the blemish of an eviction on her record, they have offered to pay for a hotel stay for 2 weeks if I withdraw the eviction procedures. Since 2 weeks would probably evolve into another last-minute, urgent situation with the same demands, I denied this offer. Now, the larger family is split. While some family members are sympathetic to my plight and have privately offered their support, others still portray me as the bad guy who is torturing my sister and her kids out of self-interest. I've kept records of everything along this entire process. The state of my residence, the unapproved residence, the things that are missing, and any correspondence. Despite the tremendous pressure from my family, my lawyer friend reassures me that I'm in good legal standing. My relationship with my parents has changed, which is the most surprising result of this circumstance. Although I've always understood they gave Sarah some leeway, it's shocking how much they've disregarded my rights and boundaries in this case. This pattern has persisted throughout our lives, I've discovered. My parents allow Sarah to cause trouble, and I'm supposed to put up with both of them without complaining. I'm breaking that habit for the first time, and it's both devastating and empowering. As soon as the matter is fixed, I will publish a final update. Last update, conclusion, and contemplation. My previous update was 2 months ago, and now I'm finally writing this for my own apartment once more. The matter has been settled, albeit with considerable repercussions for the family. First, the useful result. Sarah was forcibly removed from my flat, along with all of her unapproved visitors. About 6 weeks after my last post, the sheriff finally arrived to serve the eviction notice, although the process took longer than anticipated because of certain court system delays. Sarah wasn't there when this happened. 2 days prior to the planned eviction, she had finally left the property, taking her remaining possessions with her. My place was in terrible shape. In addition to the harm I had already recorded, there were fresh problems: broken furniture, discolored carpets, holes in the walls, and what seemed to be intentional harm to my personal possessions that had been left behind. Although he was understanding, my landlord insisted that the unit be returned to its previous state. To speed up the process and regain my own space, I originally paid for the repairs myself, totaling about $3,700. Even though I had previously offered to drop the lawsuit if Sarah departed willingly, I ultimately made the decision to sue her for my missing and destroyed belongings. My viewpoint was altered by the intentional harm, and I believe she should be held accountable for her deeds. In addition to the $500 I borrowed from my lockbox, I received the whole $2,150 for the stolen and damaged goods. I didn't care if I ever saw that money, but I did care that the judgment was documented. In the aftermath for the family, Sarah is now residing with our parents. She had nowhere else to go after burning ties with several friends who had briefly taken her in, and exhausting all other choices. Her father, who saw the living circumstances in my apartment, and applied for an emergency custody adjustment, is currently the primary caregiver for her children. Sarah no longer has primary custody, although she does have weekend visitation. My parents and I no longer have the same relationship. They finally appeared to realize how bad the issue was when the eviction was put into effect. My mother called to apologize for the way things got out of hand, not for giving Sarah my key, or for invading my personal space. At best, it was a partial acknowledgement. My dad has been less cooperative. He insists that the legal path was an unnecessary escalation, and that I ought to have figured out a way to make it work. He is especially furious over the custody dispute involving Sarah's kids, which he strangely attributes to me instead of Sarah's decisions. We're talking again, but it's tense and we don't talk much. Sarah's predicament is off limits, and I've made it clear what subjects I'm ready to talk about. I've also made it very plain that they will never be able to access any of my residences again, and I won't be there to support Sarah in the event of another emergency. Though I still occasionally hear remarks about being the one who evicted his own sister, the extended family has mostly moved on to other dramas. I no longer justify myself or explain the circumstances. Individuals who are important already comprehend, and those who are not likely to do so in the future. The best thing that has happened is that I now value true friends more. My co-workers who put up with my inconsistent work schedule, my buddy who allowed me to remain with him during the eviction process, and even my landlord who supported me, rather than against me. I learned what true support looks like from these people. I've also gained important knowledge on establishing and upholding boundaries. I was expected to adjust to the family dynamic for years, where Sarah's needs always came first. It hurt to break that cycle, but it was essential. I no longer feel bad about defending my own time, space, and assets. Since the eviction, we haven't had a straight conversation about Sarah. I didn't reply to her one text message in which she accused me of destroying her life and removing her kids. She's already starting fresh dramas at our parents' house and searching for her next chance to get out of debt, based on what I've heard from family sources. Although the entire journey has been draining and occasionally tragic, I am confident that I made the proper choices all along the way. My place is once again my haven. Now that I have a calm place once more, my work has steadied. Most significantly, I've made it clear that no one, not even my family, will take advantage of me. We are grateful to everyone who helped and encouraged us during this difficult time. During the toughest of the familial pressure, your affirmation kept me strong. When everyone else's definition of good requires you to give up your boundaries, your personal space, and your dignity, there are moments when you have to be the bad guy. Thanks for watching and sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next drama-filled episode. I spent years bailing out my brother, giving him money and support, until one night he showed me how little I really meant to him. I'm James, and I'm 28 years old. I'm the type of man who has heard it all the time. Family comes first. Perhaps it was the way our mother brought us up after our father departed. Or perhaps it was simply something I held on to because it provided some warmth to my existence. For whatever reason, ever since I can remember, anytime my younger brother Sean has ripped anything apart, I've been the one picking up the bits. He's too young to give a damn, yet he's old enough to know better at age 26. Sean has always had a lot to offer. When things go well, he's the golden boy. When they don't, he's the ghost. And I suppose I was the fool who believed that he would ultimately grow out of it if I simply provided enough love, support, and affection. As is typically the case, it began modestly. "Hey dude, I don't have enough money for rent." He only sent this one SMS, and made a desperate call since his account was frozen and he had forgotten about his credit card charge. It was only temporary, I reminded myself. As the months stretched into a year, the sums increased, but I reminded myself, everyone struggles a little in their 20s. $1,200 to fix his automobile, $200 here, $600 there. Sean always had the same grateful wide-eyed expression, swearing that this would be the last time. I really wanted to believe him. He made another call around 3 days prior to New Year's Eve. This time I was in line at the grocery store, carrying a bunch of items for a small private gathering I had organized with some friends. His speech was hurried and out of breath. He had already had his automobile repossessed due to non-payment, and he was on the verge of losing it again if he didn't pay $2,500 right away. He cried and begged, saying that if he lost the automobile, he would be left jobless. That he was at last taking his life seriously. I sent him the money against all my remaining common sense. I kept it a secret from everyone. A part of me felt ashamed of how readily I gave in. The problem is that you can ignore someone for a long time when they reveal themselves to you. However, even the thickest rose-colored glasses eventually break. On New Year's Eve, Sean announced that he was going to a party in a nearby town. I thought he would be occupied with his normal activities, such as getting wasted and making promises he wouldn't remember the next day. Along with a few close pals, I stayed at home. We played board games, counted down the clock like children, and consumed much too much junk food. It was pleasant and serene, unlike anything I had experienced in a long time. I even began giving myself permission to think that perhaps this year will be different. Perhaps in 2025 I would no longer feel as though I was always dragging my brother along with me. Then my phone broke just as everything was falling into place. Sean had sent the text. "All you are is a burden. Avoid it." That was it. No apology, no explanation, nothing. 7 words that were more powerful than any blow ever could be. I initially assumed that must have been an error. He might have been intoxicated. He might have intended to text someone else. I blinked and gazed at the screen for a long minute, reading it again as if I looked closely enough the words might change. However, they didn't. The group conversation then became active. Pictures of Sean lifting a glass with some of his party friends while beaming broadly. One of them wrote, "Freedom from leeches." "Knew you knew me," as the caption for the picture. Sean was prominently shown, appearing to be completely carefree. It was as if the thousands of dollars I had struggled to make ends meet meant nothing at all. As if I meant nothing at all. I remained silent. I didn't answer. I didn't yell at him, call him, or send him a lengthy text message in rage. I simply sat there and allowed the icy emptiness to take me. I pretended to smile and said I was simply exhausted, but my buddies must have seen the change. But where that gentle hope had been, something hard and sharp began to grow inside. That night, I hardly slept at all. I kept thinking about all the times I had saved him. Every time I stood in his way of facing the punishment he deserved, he would smile, give me a slap on the back, and immediately resume his destructive behavior. That's when I realized I hadn't been doing anything for him for years. I had been giving in to him. He didn't see me as his brother. I was an idiot, a crutch, and a pocketbook. When daylight finally arrived, I knew precisely what I had to do. I started by opening my laptop and retrieving Sean's auto loan payment history. Finding the document with my name on it didn't take long. Naturally, he asked me to co-sign when he was in a dire situation, and the dealership didn't believe his credit score. Technically, I was still the car's primary owner. When Sean received the keys, he didn't even read the fine print. All he wanted to do was show his friends his new, sparkling toy. Next, I retrieved the bank statements, which displayed the number of payments that had been temporarily deducted from my account while Sean was getting back on his feet. Rather quickly, temporary life had become permanent. And I'd let it happen like a fool. The best thing is that a tow order was already in place in case Sean missed any more payments because he had already missed so many. He was also 2 days past due. Once more, it would only require one phone call. Around 8:30 a.m., I arrived. Before he could even pull himself from the residence of the stranger he had fainted in. The towing business claimed they would be pleased to expedite the pickup after instantly recalling the case. All I had to do was verify that I was the legal owner. I grinned. Yes, I am unquestionably the owner. I was enjoying a cup of coffee and watching the tow truck pull back into Sean's driveway when I parked my car across the street from his house at 9:45 a.m. Sean's automobile was still there, crookedly parked as if he'd stumbled out of it last night without thinking twice. It was a gaudy little red Mustang that even on his best days he couldn't afford. Within 5 minutes, the Mustang was off the ground, swaying slightly as the tow truck driver fastened everything into place. The driver had jumped out and connected it up with professional speed. I noticed Sean's front door creaking open as he drove away. He had a wild mess of hair, was barefoot, and had no shirt on. He was obviously attempting to take in what he was seeing, as he blinked against the morning sun. He stood there frozen for a moment. Then, shouting something I couldn't hear from my car and swinging his arms, he ran toward the street. Not even slowing down did the tow truck. I barely heard Sean's voice shouting down the street as I rolled down my window. Hello? Confused and in a panic. After that, my phone broke. A call is coming in. Sean. I saw it ring. Give it another ring. And once more. His first text message of the morning appeared on my screen when it eventually went to voicemail. Where's my C, dude? Leaning back and allowing the sun's warmth to penetrate the cold morning air, I placed the phone face down on the passenger seat. I didn't feel like the one bearing dead weight for the first time in a very long time. But I wasn't done yet. Not at all, as the actual storm was still approaching and Sean's car was only the first step. I just let the sensation take hold for a few more minutes as I sat there. It wasn't precisely happy. It was more serene than that, akin to being on the edge of a field after everything had been destroyed by a fire. Free, empty, and charred. A new beginning. My hands stopped shaking. I didn't have a racing heart. I wasn't rushing to mend Sean's newest catastrophe for the first time in years. He left a mess for me to clear, and I wasn't running to pick up bits. At last, I was allowing everything to crash as it should have. The actual consequences started as soon as I arrived home. Sean destroyed my phone. 6 missed calls, 12 and 19. Texts began to pour in, first in a confused panic, then in wrath, and then, as they turned the bend, in full-on rage. What did you do? Respond to me. This isn't amusing. I'm going to call the police. I laughed at that one. He might give it a shot. The documents and the title were in my name. Legally speaking, Sean had been using my car for months without making any payments. I was doing precisely what I was legally allowed to do, if anything. Sean, however, was not the kind to let the truth hold him back. He was beating on the door of my apartment by midday. I didn't respond. The muffled thuds of his fist hitting the wood, the occasional shout of, "Open up," and the words, "You're ruining my life," drifted through as I ate a sandwich at my kitchen table. I had an exact mental image of him. Hairy, bloodshot eyes, pacing like a stymied animal, blaming everyone but himself. He changed his strategy after seeing that I wasn't going to the door. He placed a message beneath the door. It took me an hour to even pick it up. I did, but there was only one phrase, written furiously in black marker, "You'll be sorry." That's Sean, always threatening to do something when he couldn't win a fight. I reclined in my chair and gazed at the ceiling, reflecting on all the events that had preceded this. Bending for years. Years of repressing disappointment and rage. I kept convincing myself that if I waited a little longer, he would change. As I ate ramen noodles for dinner, I reflected on the times I had paid his rent to keep him from being evicted. He had squandered his money at a casino, so I sold my game console, my only true outlet, to pay his utility bill. The birthday presents that were supposed to arrive but never did. When he said he would reimburse me the following week, it invariably turned into the following month. The following month always turned into a never. Worst of all, I recalled his smile when he was feeling good. Before he decided I was a burden, a parasite and disposable, I was all charm, bright teeth and backslaps. I was no longer expendable. His number was not blocked by me. I didn't have to. It was so much sweeter to ignore him. It was a silent form of retaliation that tasted better than anything dirty or noisy, so I let him scream into space while I went about my day. The following day, I gave the bank a call regarding the account I had foolishly left open for him to begin saving under my supervision. Surprise, surprise. Once more, it was overdrawn. No more. I took a lunch break and closed the account. He claimed he never used the credit card, but I canceled it since he had a secondary user slot on it and had accrued $1,200 in Uber Eats and bar taps. I canceled it, paid the remaining balance myself, and severed all financial ties between us. Cutting the final rotten rope from a sinking ship was how it felt. The last component then arrived. Just before New Year's, I sent him $2,500, do you recall? Yes, my bank handled the wire transfer. I also had the receipts to show it wasn't a gift, because Sean had texted me to promise to pay it back as a loan. That afternoon, I submitted a small claims lawsuit. I didn't anticipate receiving my money back. I didn't care that Sean was having trouble making ends meet. I wanted it documented. I wanted to serve him. Like a foul stench, I wanted the paper trail to follow him everywhere. By the time the court date arrived, I pictured him attempting to explain to a judge how, despite his declaration of freedom, a few well-placed signatures were still able to bring him down. I wasn't finished yet, though. I began going through every email, every receipt, every favor, and every payment. After a long, chaotic year, I quietly and precisely chronicled everything, much like an accountant balancing a ledger. Yes, it was emotional, but it was also exhausting. On some nights, I stayed up too late, questioning whether I had gone too far. I might as well forget about it. But then I recalled how Sean had looked at me in those pictures, smiling, toasting to his freedom from me, raising a glass, and laughing with his buddies. Let go of the man who never turned out his lights. Get rid of the person who filled his tank with gas. No longer bound by the man who fought his battles for him when he was too weak or sluggish to do so yourself. I wasn't wanted by him. Okay, I was finished. When I received a very intriguing piece of mail a few days later, the final piece, the one that would truly cause everything to fall apart, fell into place. I was trying to get Sean a better deal on his insurance, therefore it was a notice concerning his coverage, which had been combined with mine. Due to non-payment, his coverage was cancelled. I was aware that Sean was unable to pay for his own insurance. I was also aware that he had most likely not even realized yet, but he would, particularly after learning that driving without insurance wasn't merely a minor in our state. He could face severe fines, license suspension, and, let's face it, a rough time if he was pulled over or involved in an accident. I felt the weight of the envelope as I sat on my couch and turned it over in my hands. There was no gloating, not even joy. Relief was felt. I was relieved that I was no longer carrying it. Sean was relieved that he would at last experience true consequences for the first time in his life. And the repercussions was going to be stunning when it did come. But I simply had to wait first. Await the subsequent call. The subsequent frantic knock on my door. The following text is a cry for assistance. and I would be prepared when the time came. It took very little time. 3 days later, just before noon, Sean's name appeared on my phone once more. I didn't respond. All I did was watch it ring. My stomach's old knot of guilt, which used to tighten, is smaller and looser now. After a minute, a text message appeared. "I really need your assistance, bro." I put the phone down, this time facing up, and returned to my coffee, giving him time to process the fact that the bridge he had destroyed would not magically repair itself. Another minute went by. "I'm trapped, man, please." Was stopped. "No coverage. They're discussing towing once more." "I promise to repay you. Hurry up." It nearly made me chuckle. Nearly. The irony was simply too flawless. He was unaware that there was no longer an automobile that could be towed. The Mustang had long since vanished. It was already up for auction 2 states away from the loan business. Regarding his license, they would be able to see the unpaid infractions he had accrued under my insurance without having to pay a thing if they were thoroughly reviewing his record. The kind of mess that takes more than a few words of apology to resolve. There was another text. "Bro, please, I beseech you. What I do matters to me." It dawned on me then. The desperation had become real. Sean didn't usually cry like a crocodile. They were the ones he paraded whenever he needed cash or pity. This was raw, ugly, and real. I ought to have felt guilty. Once, perhaps. I would have a long time ago. However, I only experienced a somber sense of fulfillment. The kind that eventually becomes a weight off your chest after years of being exploited, disregarded, and thrown away. One more call. One more voicemail. He left one this time. At first I didn't open it. For a time I just sat there and gazed out the window, watching the clouds pass in thick sluggish clumps. The world was peaceful now, and I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next calamity to hit my door. Sean's voice sounded little and defeated when I eventually listened to the voicemail. "Man, please, James. I mean it. I can't drive the car," they remark. "They claim that they will tow it. I have no other people. I promise to find a way to reimburse you. Just one last time, please. I am aware that I made a mistake. I'm aware that what I said wasn't appropriate. Don't leave me like this, please. I apologize." It was there. I've been waiting for this apology for years. And it had no meaning whatsoever. As it wasn't authentic. Not because he knew what he was doing. It wasn't because he understood how much he had offended me. He needed something, that's why. Once more, always. I didn't answer. Rather, I launched the app for my bank account, the new, pristine one I had just started a few days prior, and gazed at the balance. Mine. Safe. Undisturbed. It seemed to be a little, concrete indication that I had at last prioritized myself, that I was no longer the family ATM, and that I wasn't responsible for Sean's errors. I looked over his social media later that evening just out of curiosity. Although I shouldn't have, I did. From the side of the road he was posting. An angry, blurry selfie with police lights flashing in the backdrop. Some people are only concerned when they are in need. I suppose it's better for me to have no false family. Rust betrayed, Mostumer knowledge gained. The remarks were harsh. The majority came from his party friends, who delighted to add insults but didn't know half the story. Some are sympathetic, but the most are merely joking about being arrested or getting wrecked to start 2025 off right. Some of our common friends sent comments inquiring about his well-being. I remained silent. The post didn't appeal to me. Sean was somewhat correct, so I wasn't even tempted to. Fake family was better for him. I was too. When I woke up the following morning, the flat was peaceful. Just sunlight streaming through the blinds and the quiet, steady hum of a life that is now becoming mine again. No desperate texts, no missed calls. Feeling lighter than I had in years, I took a stroll about the neighborhood and breathed in the cool January air. Waiting for the next explosion is over. Fixing those who didn't want to be fixed is no longer an option. Sean had one more message waiting for me when I returned home. This time it wasn't furious. It wasn't an emergency. There were only 2 words. I apologize. Sean apologized, but I didn't respond. After the first time, I didn't even open the mail again. Nothing else could be said. I did not despise him. It would have been simpler to hate. To be honest, hate at least suggests that you are still concerned and that you have a keen sense of life. Distance was what I felt now. It was similar to glancing at an old photograph of a life I hardly recognized. Sean stopped talking for a few weeks. No phone calls, texts, or unexpected visits. I wasn't sure whether he had finally figured it out or whether life had just swept him away for a bit. I didn't chase him anyway. I didn't follow up. For once I paid attention to my own life. When I did, the speed at which things began to alter was almost shocking. I began returning to the gym. Just for me, not for anybody else, and not to prove anything. I made contact with old acquaintances that I had gradually lost touch with over the years. Friends who were fed up with my being treated like a doormat have quietly moved on. I even began taking on additional job shifts. I had ambitions of my own now. Things I wanted to save for, and places I wanted to see. Not because I needed the money to clean up someone else's mess. Sean's world, as I imagined it, diminished as mine expanded. I ran across an old mutual friend of ours who used to know Sean well around 2 months after that crazy New Year's Eve. We met one Saturday afternoon at a neighborhood coffee shop, and his name was Nate. In the uneasy dance of two individuals who have too much history in common and not enough recent connection, we engaged in the typical small talk. But Nate eventually mentioned Sean. "Have you recently spoken to your brother?" he questioned, not looking up as he stirred his coffee. "Nope," I replied plainly. Then, as if unsure of my level of interest, he looked up at me. With a shrug I said, "He's, not doing so great, man." Nate nodded slowly and said, "Not really my problem anymore." "Yeah," I assumed. "I just wanted to let you know. He's currently living with a female and barely making ends meet. He lost his job a few weeks ago and he's reportedly already overdue on his rent." I remained silent. What could be said? Sean's path was always going in this direction. I had been in the way, fixing every pothole he stumbled into, and that was the only thing that had ever delayed it. After hesitating, Nate continued. "He's been telling everyone that you left him homeless and abandoned him." I chuckled quietly to myself. Just exhausted, not even resentful. It sounds about right. "You're not angry." "No," I told the truth. "I just finished." Saying it aloud brought a certain calm. After giving me a clumsy shoulder clap as if he wasn't sure how to handle the subject, Mate and I parted ways. Later that evening, I considered Sean's version of events, in which he fabricated the victimization to fit his own narrative. How he most likely portrayed me as the unappreciative, nasty sibling that kicked him when he was on the ground. I used to care what other people thought of me. I used to be consumed with it. No more. If the people who mattered cared enough to find out, they would know the truth, just as I did. It was a slow spring that year. Clear blue mornings that make you want to roll down the windows and drive aimlessly replaced the chilly, dreary clouds. I started simply getting in the car, choosing a direction, and driving away. About 40 minutes outside the city, I found myself on the outskirts of a little village one Saturday. Nestled between a second-hand clothing store and a bakery was a little bookshop. On a whim, I stopped by and spent 2 hours looking through old paperbacks and discussing my favorite authors with the proprietor. I purchased a handcrafted journal, a few books, and a couple of mugs. Even though it was just a Saturday spin done the way I wanted it to be, free of commitments, urgent calls, or impending danger, it felt like the greatest triumph of my life. I received a letter in the mail a few days later. Not emails or texts, but actual mail. I could tell right away that the handwriting was sloppy and hurried. I nearly tossed it away without opening it, Sean. Nearly. However, my curiosity overcame me. There was only one page of paper inside. "James, I understand that you most likely don't give a damn anymore, and I wouldn't hold it against you. I wanted to apologize for everything. I was self-centered. I exploited you. Since you were my brother and that's what brothers are meant to do, I told myself it wasn't that horrible. I now understand how much I used and hurt you. I apologize. The only person who ever made a sincere effort to assist me was you. Now that I think about it, I wrecked it. My goal is to improve. I'm not counting on you to believe me. All I wanted was for you to know. Even though I didn't deserve it, I am grateful for everything you did." I sat there for a while, Sean, flipping the letter over in my hands. It was the most sincere thing he had ever spoken to me. More truthful. And perhaps, just possibly, this time he meant it. I didn't write back though. Not out of spite, not out of rage, but out of comprehension. Not all life chapters are intended to be revisited, not because of hatred, but because rebuilding them would only result in the same circle of pain. Some bridges remain destroyed. Allowing someone back into your life is not always a sign of forgiveness. At times it simply entails sending them best wishes from afar. After carefully folding the letter and putting it in a drawer, I continued with my day. And I came to a lovely realization when summer finally arrived, bringing long evenings and bright golden light. I was no longer surviving. I was still alive. And I was just bearing my own burden, not anyone else's. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. I gave my sister $45,000 in free housing. But when I refused to gift her my apartment, my family turned against me. I, a 28 female, am still in disbelief at their actions, so I need to let my family know what's going on. I've put a lot of effort into building my life, and I currently serve as the financial director at a large software business in Seattle. My younger sister Emily, 25 female, has been renting my Bellevue apartment for the past 2.5 years, and I also own my current home downtown. Let me tell you a little about our family's history. Emily was always the favorite child growing up. She was discovered sneaking out to parties when I was studying finance and doing unpaid internships. She was receiving police citations for disturbing the peace at Ali Beach when I received my first promotion. She chose to become an influencer after I completed a big deal at work last year, maxing out our parents' credit cards to purchase $5,000 worth of camera gear that is now sitting in their garage gathering dust. In spite of all, I've always made an effort to help her. When she and her 25-year-old fiancé Ethan needed a place to live, I gave them my Bellevue condo for free. I've also paid for her car repairs and twice wiped off her credit card debt. No utilities, no rent, nothing. For their wedding, which is in 3 weeks, I even gave them $45,000. I got a text from Emily last week. Tonight the family is having supper at Mom and Dad's. Important topics to talk about at the wedding. I thought they were in need of additional funds for some absurd wedding extra, such as the ice sculpture they had been discussing. I didn't know what was really going to happen. Something didn't feel right as I got to my parents' place. In the living room, Emily, Ethan, Mom and Dad all snuggled together, whispering to one another. As soon as I entered, they fell silent. The tension was evident at supper. While Dad engaged in awkward small chat about his golf game, Mom continued to refill wine glasses. At last, Emily cleared her throat as her mother brought out dessert. She said, "We need to discuss your wedding gift," with an unusually serious expression. "Well," Emily continued, looking at Ethan and then our parents before going back to me. "We've all been talking. And we think there's something specific you should give us instead." I raised an eyebrow. "I thought the $45,000 I already gave you was my gift." "Your apartment," she continued. I waited, fork suspended mid-air. I almost believed they were kidding when they said, "The one in Bellevue where Ethan and I have been living." However, their solemn facial expressions conveyed a different message. "You can't be serious," I remarked, setting down my glass. They actually expected me to give them my $450,000 property as a wedding present. "You think you're so perfect with your fancy job and your 2 apartments. You're selfish, Catherine. I already gave you $45,000 for this wedding. Not to mention you've been living in my apartment rentrée for 2.5 years. I don't even make you pay utilities." That's when things got ugly. Emily's face flushed with anger and she exploded. "Your sister has a point," Mom said quietly. "You're successful. You have another apartment. Emily is getting married and starting a family. This would be such a wonderful gesture." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stared at her, stunned by the sudden outburst, but what followed was even worse. Emily yelled, "Look at you, 28 years old, married to your job. In a few years, no one will even want you anymore. At least I've found love. How am I the selfish one here? Because you're hoarding all this property when you don't even need it. I've been supporting Emily for years." "Don't be greedy, Catherine," Dad said sternly. "Family should come first." I felt as though I was in some kind of twisted alternate reality. "I can't believe this," I said, my voice shaking. I looked at my parents, expecting them to step in and tell Emily she had gone too far, but instead they nodded in agreement with her statements. "You just got lucky with your job. Some of us have to work in the real world." That was rich coming from someone who had never held a job for more than 6 months. Lucky? I worked my ass off through college, did unpaid internships, and put in 80-hour weeks to get to where I am. Do you have any idea how many hours I put in to afford those apartments? How many years did I spend paying off those mortgages? Oh, please. Emily rolled her eyes. I shot back. You want me to just give away my property? Property that I worked incredibly hard for, and that I'm still paying the mortgage on. How dare you? Mom snapped. Your sister is trying to build a life with Ethan. They want to start a family. And what about my stability? She asked. The room erupted in chaos as Ethan, speaking for the first time, said, Once we get settled, start our family. Absolutely not. I interrupted. The apartment isn't for sale, and it's certainly not a gift. In fact, given how you're all acting, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live. I'm leaving. This conversation is over. You're going to end up alone with nothing but your precious apartments. Emily screamed after me as I headed for the door. Mom began screaming that I was destroying the family, and Dad slammed his hand on the table and demanded that I stop being such a pain in the ass. How could they do this to me? How could they treat me like an ATM with an apartment to hand over? I sobbed as I slammed the door behind me and practically ran to my car, my hands shaking so much that I could hardly get the key in the ignition. The following day, I was barely able to concentrate at work. I turned off my phone and tried to concentrate on my work, but by the end of the day, I knew I had to check my sister's social media. Mom, Catherine, please be reasonable. Your sister needs this. Dad, call us immediately. Your behavior was unacceptable. Emily, you've always been jealous of me. You're just bitter because no one loves you. My own sister's decision to choose financial belongings over family is heartbreaking. It seems that some people will never comprehend the actual meaning of life. She regularly vents our family issues there, and sure enough, there was a post. The comments were pouring in. Oh my God, what happened? Family should always come first. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Emily was controlling the conversation and portraying me as the bad guy by making ambiguous, dramatic claims about having toxic siblings and prioritizing money over family. Then I received a text from my aunt. What's going on, Catherine? Your mother called me and bemoaned the fact that you're not helping your sister. I didn't answer, so what could I say? That my whole family is expecting me to give away hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property? That they're emotionally blackmailing me because I refused? But things were going to get much worse. I went to check on my Bellevue apartment the following day, but when I got there and tried to use my key, it didn't work. My property's locks had been changed, so I took out my phone and contacted Emily, who after a few rings gave me a chilly, "What do you want? Why have my apartment's locks been changed?" I made a demand. After a pause, Emily actually chuckled and said, "Catherine, it's not your apartment anymore. We now own it." Are you insane? I am the owner of that unit. I covered the cost. It's mine. Not for long, she muttered. Additionally, don't waste your time threatening to sue me or contact the police. You would never sue your own sister, as we both know. Catherine. The line died. I was stunned as I stood there looking at my phone. Calling our parents was my first thought, but I knew they would never support me. They didn't. I poured a big glass of wine for myself when I got back to my flat and settled down on my couch. My thoughts were racing with potential fixes. I could make a police call. I might file a lawsuit against them. However, would I truly want to witness my sister's arrest? My phone beeped with a notice as I considered my alternatives. Emily had made a new social media post. I opened it against my better judgment. As I read her post, I felt sick to my stomach. My sister Catherine will be attending our wedding in 3 weeks, but Ethan and I, along with my parents, have chosen not to invite her. Nobody deserves to be here on our big day if they don't act like family. We are excited to celebrate with our really loved ones who know what family is all about. Numerous family friends and relatives have already left dozens of comments on the page, the most of which were confused or inquired as to what had transpired. Everyone was left to conjecture, because Emily was not answering any of them. My phone began ringing almost instantly with calls from aunts, uncles and cousins who wanted to know what was happening. I paid them all no attention. What could I say? That my entire family turned against me when I refused to give my sister my flat as a wedding present. I poured another glass of wine after finishing mine and shutting off my phone. It felt like a dream. I was merely a woman attending a family dinner 24 hours ago. Now, 2 weeks prior to her wedding, my sister was publicly humiliating me. Something stiffened inside me as the immediate shock subsided. They believed they were in control and could intimidate and coerce me into ceding my property. They were mistaken. I could play hardball with them if they wanted to. I had to wait for the appropriate time, though. I needed to conduct some planning. One update. because I needed to make sure everything was in order. I haven't spoken up yet. It is necessary to share what transpired at my sister's wedding yesterday. I carefully planned for 2 weeks following the lock change event and my family's attempted property grab. I first discussed my rights as a property owner with the legal team at my company. What I already knew was validated by them. Regardless of family relationships, it is illegal to change locks without the owner's consent. I got in touch with John, a locksmith I knew from last year when I had locked myself out of my apartment in the heart of the city. I told him I needed a special favor. You can meet me on Saturday at 8 a.m. at my Bellevue property. Without my consent, the current residents changed the locks. Without hesitation, he agreed. I then hired professional movers and made a reservation for a storage unit close to the apartment, providing them with very detailed instructions for the wedding day. I also kept a record of everything. Screenshots of their text messages, recordings of their menacing voicemails, and images of their social media posts. The wedding day was yesterday. I was aware that the event will take place at 2 p.m. at the Salish Lodge, so the morning would be spent making preparations. With my heart racing, I parked my Bellevue apartment around the corner at 7:45 a.m. John showed up at exactly 8 a.m. As he got closer to the door, he said, "You sure about this?" Showing him my ID and property deed, I said, "Absolutely. I need to reclaim my property." A few minutes later, he had the door open and was putting in new locks. When I entered, I was horrified by what I saw. Without my consent, they had entirely redecorated. Bold wallpaper now covered the walls that I had painted a grayish neutral color. Gaudy curtains had taken the place of my bespoke blinds. They had even taken out some of my furniture and put their own in its place. At 8:30 a.m., the movers arrived. Sharp. I had them pack everything that pertained to Emily and Ethan as I walked them through each room systematically. Everything was packed into boxes, including their furniture, electronics, clothing, and hygiene. Even though my hands were shaking, I was determined. My phone was inundated with notifications around 9:45 a.m. It seems that one of Emily's bridesmaids had noticed the moving truck while driving past the property. I was inundated with calls and texts in a matter of minutes. "What on earth are you doing, Emily? Stop this right now, Mom, Catherine. Your sister's wedding day is being ruined by you, Dad. I'm going to call the cops, Ethan." None of them got a response from me. Rather, I sent them all to my lawyer, who was waiting. He promptly wrote a formal notification to each of them regarding improper property modifications and unlawful lock changes. Deifications. Everything was loaded and packaged by 11 a.m. While I oversaw a skilled cleaning staff, the movers made their way to the storage container. My phone was constantly buzzing. "You wicked witch, Emily. You're ruining my house when I'm getting ready for my wedding. How could you have treated your sister like this on her wedding day, Mom? This cannot be forgiven, Dad. You're not our daughter anymore." I set up the security cameras and took some last pictures of the spotless apartment around midday. I then wrote Emily a message. "Best wishes on your wedding day. Unit 456 at Eastside Storage is a secure place to keep your possessions. 7753 is the access code. You've got 20 days to gather everything. You must realize that it's time to find a place of your own now that you're married. The only wedding present you deserve is this." At 6 p.m., I set the message to go out, just as I knew their reception would begin. After that, I returned home, poured a glass of champagne, and bided my time. I had another phone explosion at 6:01 p.m. I just shut it off and had a bubble bath this time. I felt totally satisfied with my choices for the first time in weeks. Curiosity overcame me at midnight, and I checked social media. A tearful tirade about her insane sister ruining her ideal day was tweeted by Emily. However, there was an intriguing development in the comments. Questions were being asked. "Hold on, did you attempt to move into her apartment? So you changed the locks when you were renting there? You thought she would offer you a property worth $450,000? The public's perception was shifting. My cousin Rachel, who had always been close to Emily, just sent me a private message after learning the truth. "I'm shocked that they thought you would give them your property. You did the right thing, for what it's worth." I found more than 200 text messages and 47 missed calls when I got up this morning. I've never read them. In order to begin getting the flat ready for legitimate tenants, those who will actually pay rent, I instead got in touch with a property management business. I did answer the phone when my aunt called. She said, "Your mother is hysterical. Claims that everything has been damaged by you. Did she mention that they attempted to take my belongings and changed my locks?" Calmly, I asked. A pause. No, she didn't mention that. I believed so. Ethan's father just sent me an email requesting that I take urgent action to resolve this matter. They now need money for a rental deposit, so apparently they had to postpone their honeymoon in the Maldives. If it weren't so depressing, the irony would be amusing. I disagree with some who might consider my actions on their wedding day to be harsh. They decided not to invite me to the wedding. They decided to modify my hair. They decided to attempt stealing my belongings. There are repercussions for actions. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with my attorney to talk about restraining orders. My family is sending me more and more frightening messages. Therefore, I believe I will need them. But for now, I'm content to sit in my apartment in the heart of the city and enjoy the tranquility, knowing that my property is safe, and that my limits are finally set. Losing a family member is sometimes necessary to regain your dignity. The second update. 2 weeks have passed since the incident on the wedding day, and everything has changed. I'm here to tell you how justice was done at last. Let me start by expressing my gratitude to everyone who liked my previous post. I learned from your remarks that I wasn't incorrect to defend what was rightfully mine. Let me now explain how I completely reversed my family's fortunes. Regarding Emily, Ethan, and my parents' defamatory social media statements, my lawyer submitted formal cease and desist letters to them the day following the wedding. However, that was only the start. We made an intriguing discovery while collecting evidence. Emily used more than just my parents' credit card to purchase the $5,000 worth of photography gear. On several credit applications, she had falsified their signatures. My attorney attested to the fact that this was credit card theft. I informed the fraud departments of the credit card companies about this in an anonymous manner. Notifications of unauthorized accounts and ongoing investigations reached my parents in a matter of days. All of a sudden, their issues were more serious than my nasty behavior on the wedding day. I wasn't finished, though. Do you recall Ethan's claim that they could assist with the mortgage? It turns out that he had been boasting about their plot to buy my property at work. I emailed his HR department a thorough email outlining their attempted property theft and unlawful lock change. His employer, a real estate corporation, did not approve of an employee's attempt to unlawfully take property. He was put on administrative leave while the investigation was conducted. And then I found something better. Not all of Emily's spending had been approved by my parents. They had been claiming her unsuccessful social media endeavor as a home company and deducting her influencer costs from their taxes. I sent all of the paperwork, including evidence that there was no real business, to the IRS. The phone call from my aunt's dad's sister was the actual surprise. "I have something to tell you," she said. "To pay for Emily's wedding, your parents took out a second mortgage on their home. I discovered that you handed them $45,000, despite their claims to the contrary. A forensic accountant was employed by me. The outcomes were startling. In order to fund Emily's lifestyle and guilt-trip me for money, my parents had been lying about their financial situation for years. Some of the disparities in my credit history could be explained by the fact that they had even taken out loans in my name when I was a college student. In addition to demanding the full payback of any improper loans, I had my lawyer write them a letter outlining all we had discovered." Mom's reaction. She complained on Facebook about her ungrateful daughter ruining the family after having a nervous breakdown. The post had a stunning backlash. Before Mom could remove the post, screenshots were making the rounds in our extended family group chats, when a family friend who works at their bank responded, "Is this about the fraudulent loan applications?" Emily attempted to repair the damage by acting like the victim once more, but I was prepared. I uploaded all the proof. The unlawful lock change, the tax fraud paperwork, the falsified credit applications, everything. As her fans watched her meticulously constructed image fall apart, her influencer ambitions came crashing down. Emily and my parents are no longer in contact with Ethan's family. They don't want to be linked to known credit scammers apparently. Their idyllic nuptials have come to represent their demise. My parents are currently being investigated for loan and tax fraud. They were forced to employ their own attorney, who suggested that they cut off all communication with me. Dad's membership in the golf club was suspended while the investigation was underway. It seems that their policies regarding financial impropriety are quite stringent. It feels amazing to experience karmic justice. After witnessing the proof, every flying monkey they threw my way has retreated. Last weekend, my cousin Rachel had a family supper. Emily and my parents weren't invited. After the 20-day notice period ended, I gave all of their possessions from the storage unit to a charitable organization. and I'm having my Bellevue condo professionally refurbished. In contrast to my sister, the property management business has already identified possible renters who comprehend the idea of making rent payments. I feel better than I have ever felt. Sometimes the nicest thing that may happen to you is to get rid of poisonous family members. They lost everything because they believed they could intimidate me into submitting. Their financial security, social stature, and reputation. The nicest part is that all I had to do was reveal the truth. By their own deeds, they ruined themselves. I'll reveal some good developments in my life in the upcoming update. I'm enjoying seeing karma work for the time being. Keep in mind that being family does not need you to burn yourself alive in order to keep others warm. The third update. My last update was 6 months ago. I wanted to see how everything worked out, so I've been holding off on sharing this. The outcomes surpassed my expectations in terms of satisfaction. Let's begin with my folks. They were saddened by the IRS inquiry. Convicted of numerous counts of loan and tax fraud. They were punished severely. Dad was fired as CFO. An executive's record does not reflect well on financial crimes. They had to move into a tiny apartment in a less desirable neighborhood after having to sell their home to pay back taxes and fines. Their social status is utterly ruined. Dad's membership in the golf club was canceled, and Mom was kicked off all of her charity boards. Dad is only able to get a part-time consulting job at the age of 58 because of a fraud probe on his record. Penalties and court fees drain their retirement funds. Mom stays at home most of the time because she is too embarrassed to see her old pals. After only 4 months, Emily and Ethan's marriage fell apart. They began blaming one another after Ethan lost his real estate job since trying to steal property doesn't look well on a realtor's record. When he found out she had applied for credit cards in his name, it was the last straw. He returned to live with his parents after filing for divorce. In order to shield their son from my sister's financial wrongdoings, his family engaged a combative divorce lawyer. Emily currently lives with 2 roommates in a studio apartment and works as a barista, her first real job, after being unable to return to live with our parents. When her fans learned about her fake past, her influencer dreams came to an end. She lost her automobile to foreclosure, and now rides the bus to work. My parents made an effort to get back in touch last month by sending a heartfelt email about mending the family. Their true hope is that I will assist them in regaining their financial stability. In response, my attorney reminded me of the fraudulent loans they had made in my name, and threatened to take legal action if they kept in touch. I'll now give you an update on my life, which has been incredible. I mentioned that I was promoted to the position of youngest CFO in the history of my organization. My strong ethical convictions and unshakable integrity were particularly mentioned by the board in their conclusion. Irony that is delicious. A professional couple who respect limits and pay their rent the Bellevue flat, which has been refurbished. I immediately put the money into my investment portfolio. The finest part, though, comes after. I discovered true love. I took photography classes and joined hiking clubs to broaden my social network while concentrating on my career. I met James, 32 million, a software architect who shares my interests, in this way. He respects my success and freedom, unlike my family. We moved in together 6 months after we first met while taking pictures of eagles at Mount Rainier. My family wasn't anything compared to his. When we first met, his mother gave me a hug and expressed her pride in the way I managed my family's circumstances. She stated it takes guts to confront entitled people, especially if they are relatives. Thanks to my savings and investments, James and I made a cash bid on a stunning modern property with views of the mountains last week. In the meantime, my sister needs a co-signer in order to be eligible for a studio apartment lease. The entire extended family has changed sides. They now turn to me for career and financial assistance. The daughter of my cousin Rachel is working as an intern at my business. I'm helping her develop a morally upright career. I drove by Emily's coffee shop yesterday. She appeared worn out and irate as she stood behind the counter in her U.S. standard issue apron. I didn't enter. Instead, I prepared for another day of managing a profitable division at a Fortune 500 firm by driving my brand new Tesla to my office. I sometimes wonder if they consider how their greed brought them to ruin. Their reputation ruined, Mom and Dad in their small flat. Emily and her housemates are earning minimum pay. Ethan's career was ruined, and he now lives with his parents. I'm doing well in the interim. My investments are increasing, my business is booming, and I'm creating a lovely life with a wonderful man and his devoted family. My true friends appreciate me for who I am, not for what I can provide. Living spectacularly as your enemies watch their life fall apart. knowing they did it to themselves, is the best kind of retaliation. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who helped me. Stand your ground if you are up against entitled family members. You will obtain something more important, even if you lose your toxic family: genuine happiness and self-respect. Life is going well and will only get better. Thanks for watching and sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next drama-filled episode. My family cut me off for 10 years for becoming a carpenter. Now they've come back asking to hold a reunion at my home. Am I the asshole for refusing? They finally showed up at my new residence after being absent from our family reunions for a decade, during which time they had been cut off. They appeared to have a pale complexion as soon as they entered the room. They were rendered dumbfounded by the next thing I uttered, which was my carefully planned retaliation. The shocking turn of events, however, occurred when I divulged the information that completely demolished their perception of me, as well as all they believed they knew about our history. This is a narrative about betrayal, the strength to rise alone, and the moment when everything came full circle. Check it out, Reddit. In the year 2000, I was sitting on the porch of the house where I had spent my youth, watching my parents and siblings laugh inside the house, despite the fact that I had not been invited to the reunion meal. There was nothing that I had done wrong. No wrongdoing, no treachery, and no drama. Simply put, I did not conform to their conception of success. My younger sister Naomi was the golden child and chose to pursue a career in medicine, while I decided to pursue a different path. My older brother Darren graduated with a degree in law. A carpenter is what I became. The gratification of constructing something with my hands, the scent of sawdust, and the craft itself are all things that I greatly like. To them, however, I was the source of the humiliation that they avoided bringing up during family get-togethers. Small things like birthdays that were ignored, late invitations, and subtle digs about my potential were the beginning of it. One year, they held the yearly family gathering without even informing me that it was going to take place. It wasn't until I saw a photo on Facebook that I found out. Inadvertently, my cousin included me in the group. With a sigh, my mother responded to my inquiry by saying, "We figured you'd be too busy or uncomfortable." I called her to inquire about it. There is discomfort. I was their son, and their brother, yet all of a sudden I felt like I made no sense. I made an effort to disregard it. They might have been correct. It's possible that I was the only one who noticed, but it kept happening. Over the course of several years, photographs were uploaded to the internet. I was removed from group chats, and I was not invited to weddings. I decided to stop calling. They failed to take notice. I relocated to a little town that was 2 hours away, and because I was the black sheep, nobody knew who I was. I put everything I had into my carpentry business, and things began to change gradually as a result of my efforts. It did not happen overnight. I worked as a repairman and a bespoke furniture maker for many years, and I lived a humble existence. Afterwards, one day, a local hotel proprietor gave me a commission to design and construct luxury interiors with distinctive themes. The work I did garnered attention from publications, social media, and even a brief television spot. For a period of 3 years, I was not only stable. All was well with me. After purchasing a piece of land, I proceeded to construct my ideal house from the ground up. Everything from the beams to the panels to the inches was mine, and I had constructed it all by myself. During those years, I never once communicated with my family in any way. It is not out of animosity, but rather pure preservation. On the other hand, I saw the expressions. They started like my business articles and left remarks that were really vague, such as, "Proud of you." As if that could make up for 10 years of being excluded from that. I did not give a response. After that, there was a communication from my brother Darren that came out of nowhere 2 months before Christmas. "Mom wanted to know if you would be able to host the family reunion that will take place this year. Your place is really stunning." I could not believe what I was seeing on the TV. After 10 years of silence, after they severed my connection with them like a sick limb, they indicated that they wanted to utilize my house as the backdrop for their reunion. Simply said, it was a casual request, as if nothing had ever occurred, and there was no apology or acknowledgement of the past provided. I failed to provide a response. On the contrary, I devised a more advantageous method. On Christmas Eve, shortly after sundown, I lit up the enormous handcrafted tree that was in my living room, baked the cinnamon pastries that my grandmother used to make, and set the table with flatware that was in excellent condition. I invited one guy, Mr. Hampton, who was the best friend of my grandfather, who passed away. In a time when no one else did, he was the only person who treated me like a member of the family. Over the course of several decades, we sat, ate, and exchanged stories. The environment was calm and serene. After that, there was a knock. As soon as I opened the door, I was greeted by my entire family, including my parents, Darren, Naomi, their spouses, and even my cousins, all of whom were standing there with a pie that had been purchased from the store. The very first person to speak was Naomi. "It's astonishing how beautiful your home is." Brendan blew a whistle. "What? You didn't believe the wood company was that successful, did you?" The eyes of my mother darted from the handcrafted columns to the polished oak floors as she peered around the room. "My dear, you have done a wonderful job for yourself. Is that true?" At one point, we were considering the possibility of spending the evening here with each other. Similar to the past. My body did not flinch. I could not remember any of the old times. Keep in mind? It was never extended to me. To clear his throat, my father did so. "Don't let us get caught up in the past. Today is all about the family." I moved to the side and gave them a peek of the warmth of the living room, the fire that was nice and inviting, and the laughter that was coming from within the house between Mr. Hampton and me. I then stated it in a manner that was unobtrusive but unmistakable. "You are not going to do so." My mom blinked her eyes. "What is it?" "You severed my connection for a period of 10 years. There was neither a phone call nor a personal visit. But when I needed you the most, you turned your back on me. You can now see what I've constructed, and all of a sudden, I'm useful once more." Individuals who arrive at a time that is convenient for them are not welcome tonight. It is for those individuals who have never left. Their complexions became drab. Nothing came out of Darren's mouth as he attempted to speak. With an evident expression of unease, Naomi averted her gaze. A tight nod, almost as if in embarrassment, was all my father did. Then I said, "You did not lose me because of my professional life. I was unable to forgive you because you made me believe that I was never good enough. And at this point, it is too late." When I closed the door, it was not with rage, but with peace. As Mr. Hampton entered the room, he raised his glass. To the family that I had chosen, I smiled and raised my hand to the foundation of something that will last. After I closed the door, there was a silence that did not have the effect of haunting you. He was the kind of person who liberates you. I had the feeling that I had finally expressed all that had been buried deep within me, and it had been years since I heard that feeling. My voice was not heard. I did not go into a commotion. Despite the fact that I just held up a mirror and showed them what they had chosen to overlook, they did not react favorably to the information. My mobile device exploded the following morning. I have missed calls, texts, and even emails. A voicemail was left by my mother, and her voice was shaking as she spoke. She seemed to be trapped between rage and guilt. "This is not how a family operates, and I have no idea what you are doing to think you are doing it. In the case of your blood, you do not smash the door." I did not give a response. After that, the campaign of guilt began. Naomi sent me a lengthy text message in which she discussed how family members are prone to making mistakes, and how isolating people is just as hurtful as excluding them. Darren then proceeded to deflect the ball in a traditional manner. "In every situation, you took things far too personally. We did not add you because of this reason. It was simpler to do it that way. Simpler for them to do. They were not intending to get back together. Without ever accepting responsibility for their actions, they were attempting to rewrite history. Not me was what they were looking for in the end. And that was the picture." They were now able to attach themselves to one of the successes. Home that was made by hand. What is known locally. They wanted to have the appearance that they had always believed in me, despite the fact that their black sheep had turned golden. However, I was not having any of that. The real controversy began when Naomi went on social media and posted a status that was not very specific. When you try to make apologies with your family, and they turn their back on you, the pain that you feel is indescribable. All of a sudden, friends who were completely unaware of what had truly occurred began to express their sympathy. I did not pay attention to it until my aunt, who had been a constant presence in the background throughout these 10 years, sent me a direct message. "I am aware that this must be challenging. The post that Naomi made was something that I noticed, and while I won't make any assumptions about it, I will say that you were absolutely correct in what you said." The impact of the message was greater than I had anticipated. While I was thinking about it, I questioned everything. Did I go too far with this? Had I evolved into the guy I had contempt for? Then, however, I recalled the endless birthdays that I had to celebrate by myself, the notes that I had left for Reed, and the years that I had to watch my family pretend that I did not exist. I did not harbor any resentment. Having just finished carrying weight that was not mine, I was relieved. I chose to concentrate on the life that I had constructed, rather than allowing myself to be drawn back into their drama. My business was doing better than it ever had before. I was scheduled for interviews with local media outlets months in advance, and they began calling me for interviews. It wasn't because I was a showy person, rather, it was because my work gave itself away. To the point where I began mentoring young kids in the community who had been told they were not suitable for college or the business world. I even started mentoring them. A portion of myself was reflected in them. Remaining silent, unnoticed, and resolute. That eventually became my new family. Rather than the one I was born into, I selected the one I was born into. Meanwhile, the family that I had left behind continued to descend into chaos. Once again, Naomi made an update that was passive hostile and focused on entitled siblings. I received a lengthy email from Darren in which he attempted to portray himself as the mediator who consistently made an effort to engage me, and in the end, my mother resorted to mailing a Christmas card that included a note that she had written herself. In the event that you are prepared to rejoin the family, you should return home. On the other hand, I was at home. I was the one who had constructed it by hand. The most significant change occurred one evening when I was awakened by a knock at my door. Rather than coming from them, it was from a person I hadn't seen in more than 15 years. It is Rachel, my cousin. She appeared to be older, exhausted, yet unflinching. She did not provide a pre-rehearsed apology when she arrived. She arrived with the truth. I was present at that time. I am aware of this, she whispered. During all of those years, I witnessed what they did to you, but I chose to remain silent. I ought not to have done that. We sat for a whole day. In her conversation with me, she shared with me how unsettling it was for her when they removed me from the conversation. A time when she attempted to speak up, but she was advised to refrain from doing so. Isolating himself is a decision that he has made. Until she started to doubt it, she had believed it. She continued, I just want you to know that you weren't imagining you were seeing it. A wrong was done to you. In addition, I am sorry that I did not advocate for you. Despite the fact that it did not cure everything, that moment was pivotal. It demonstrated that I was not the only one. That someone had seen the truth even though they were silent about it. Personal development, professional development, and emotional development continued in the months that followed. At that point, I was no longer attempting to prove anything. Merely, I was conducting my life according to my own standards. Then, however, things took a turn that I had not anticipated. I received a letter in the mail on a particular evening in the early spring. Authentic, official, and lawful. When I opened it, I felt a sickening sensation in my stomach. The death of my father had occurred. Not all of a sudden. Despite the fact that he had been sick for some time, no one had bothered to inform me about it. It was not my family that wrote the letter. It was someone from his legal team. It was written with my name on it because he had left something for me. Rather than money or land, it is a notebook. My father's handwriting was also present within. Brittle and faded, but unmistakably from his hand. The information that I discovered in those pages not only altered everything that I had previously believed to be true about our relationship, but it also laid the groundwork for the conclusion of this tale. Before I finally opened the journal, I had been holding it in my hands for close to an hour. Over the course of time, it had been weathered, bound in leather, and marked. Following the name of my father, which was scrolled over the inner cover, there was a single date written underneath it. The month of October 2008 was the year that everything started to go apart. While I was flipping through the pages, it became quite evident that this was not merely a diary. There was a confession made. On each and every page he detailed the fractures that existed inside our family. The need to preserve an image, the successful family, the accomplished children, and the illusion of unity, were all topics that he documented in his writing. It was not out of anger that Dad worried, but rather out of fear, when I decided to pursue a career in carpentry, rather than college. When it came to defending you, I was hopeless. According to one of the entries, I thought that if I ignored it and pushed you aside, you would come back around. I made a mistake. At each and every instance in which I excluded you, I broke something within me. His statements conveyed a sense of anguish, feelings of regret, but also timidity. The remorse he felt for his decision to choose silence over love and image over integrity was something he carried with him until his grave. However, the last entry affected the most people. Since you are reading this, it indicates that I have left. Also, I am aware that I have no authority to request anything from you. You, however, are deserving of being heard, which is why I left this for you. You are entitled to better. In addition, you have the right to decide what comes next. My mind kept going back to that line for several days. I did not attend the funeral service. Naomi made it a point to share glitzy black and white photographs of the event on social media, even though she was crying while wearing fancy sunglasses. The sad expression on Darren's face as he stands at the podium. This was performance art, and I had no interest in participating in it. However, I did come to a conclusion. After a week had passed, I had a letter that was handwritten and completely sealed delivered to my mother's residence. Within it, I include a single copy of the last entry that my father made in his journal. Just the truth, which he had concealed for almost a decade, without any criticism or insults. I have included one of my own sentences underneath it. I was obliterated by you for a decade. I want to remind you that I was never truly absent. To put it simply, you weren't looking long enough. And that ought to have been the conclusion. But there aren't many clear exits through life. After a period of 2 months, Naomi arrived at my training facility. There is no call, no warning. It was as if she had not blocked me for a decade when she suddenly strolled in. In a low voice, she stated, "I read it." I arose from the chair I was sitting in and looked around. I had no idea that he had an attitude like that. After putting the tool down, I came to my feet. "Has it caused a shift in how you feel?" She was hesitant. Furthermore, that quiet was more convincing than anything else. This is not a place where I request forgiveness. In addition, she stated, "I came here because I believe he wanted us to stop acting like we were not. It is no longer something I wish to do. While you have every reason to despise me, I am not here to rewrite anything that you have written." Simply said, "I want to be honest with you." That is exactly what she did. I was told of the jealousy, and how I appeared to be free when others felt as though they were being confined by expectations. My absence caused them to feel guilty, and as a result, they chose to cover it up by dismissing me. The manner in which my success transformed me into a danger rather than a brother. It was all admitted by her. For the very first time it seemed to be happening. I did not give her a hug. I did not experience a coma. Simply put, I listened. And when she had finished, I simply responded by saying, "I appreciate the honesty, but it does not mean that the past is history. The only thing that implies is that we can stop lying about it." She gave a slight nod. I think that to be sufficient. Despite the fact that we did not develop a close relationship after that, we did become honest. Which was more than I had ever anticipated. Regarding Darren, he never made another attempt to get in touch with me, not even after he found out about the journal. As he had done in the past, he maintained his silence, allowing it to serve as a shield for his pride. I did not attempt to get closure from him. Some individuals are only able to comprehend the concept of loss when they have nothing left to hold on to. I had already moved on, but the true moment of closure arrived on the Christmas of the following year. This time, my home was packed with people who were not members of my biological family, but rather folks who had become a part of my inner circle. My cousin Rachel, Mr. Hampton, the young apprentices I coached, and the neighbors who had become like family were all members of my family. During the quiet moments I stood by the fire and stared at the room that I'd constructed with my own hands. We laughed, we ate, and we told stories. Also, we shared stories. In spite of the fact that I didn't have to say it out loud, I was having the same notion. It wasn't me who was the bad apple. Just now, I was the first person to leave the herd and go away. I discovered something that was superior to acceptance as a result of my actions. My mind was at ease. After everything was said and done, I did not require their approval, their apology, or their acceptance. I was surrounded by individuals who got me for who I truly was, and I constructed my own life from the ground up. Moreover, when the moment came, I did not have to yell out about it. I merely went around and showed them what they had decided to discard. What I did was exactly my retribution, and it was plenty. Make sure to give this tale a like, subscribe to the channel, and enable notifications if it has the ability to move you. There are more compelling true life experiences like this one. Keep tough and keep strong until we meet again. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. I quietly bought my brother's company and let Grandma reveal the truth at Easter dinner. It wasn't for revenge, it was to end the silence. Easter dinner at my folks has always happened. Same food, stories, overcooked ham, and awful tension that hangs to the walls like baked pineapple and boiling vegetables. Ben, my older brother by 3 years and 100 recognized accomplishments, takes his place at the head of the table like a throne every year. Dad always cut the turkey on that end, so he didn't get that spot. Ben always sat next to him, soaking in approbation like sunlight in the family plant. The same happened this year. Except it was. I returned to town after finalizing a deal that gets you Googled. Of course, quietly. Few LinkedIn lines, no interviews, no press photos, and a Friday 400 p.m. company-wide email. That suits me. I operate under the radar for results. Ben acts like a library foghorn. Noisy, relentless, and determined the world must hear him and his words. So, mashed potatoes were passed. Dad had 2 scotches. And Ben started his latest diet rant about how the tech sector is not for the weak. Something about hustle culture, tensioning deliverables, and overestimated emotional intelligence. I wasn't listening initially. My main concern was cutting the dry turkey breast without it collapsing into sawdust. And then he said it. He said, leaning back like a king in court, that not everyone can succeed in IT. He looked around the table for applause or a nod from Dad. Indeed, Dad gave it to me. Only employs that hushed grunt of agreement when Ben talks. The sound that meant my boy always aimed high. I didn't blink or react, simply sipped red wine while my brain processed that. Grandma Jean looked at me. She hadn't spoken, but her eyes were narrowed, her warning sign. Another boasting round followed. Ben boasted about firing a third of his workforce last month, like he was a strong leader. He termed it, right-sized. I called it. He laughed. He said I wouldn't comprehend because I wasn't in the trenches. Mom was moving in her seat to defuse the situation before it became a weekend-long passive-aggressive minefield. When she questioned how the company was going, he spat out numbers, revenue predictions, Q1 losses, and investor pressure. All of it was amazing unless you understood it. Which I did. I kept quiet not because I was frightened to speak, but to see how far he'd dig his own hole before someone gave him a lantern. Grandma was that someone. Grandma Jean is 90, but she can pay her own taxes, roast a chicken, and play whack-a-mole with egos. She constantly thinks long-term in our family. Mother, watcher, who recalls everything and forgets nothing. She waited until Ben breathed between Q4 pivot strategy and chain of command management. She turned to me, unwilling to melt her innocence and butter in her mouth, and uttered the question that would upend the table dynamic. Is that why your company bought Ethan? You could have heard a pin drop. Not simply a battery, dust particle, breath, or heartbeat. Ben froze. Fork near mouth. Dad stopped chewing mid-bite, which rarely happens until someone dies or the electricity goes out. Mom stared at her wine glass as it held the universe's secrets. And I? I kept eating my roll like nothing happened, like she hadn't lit a match in a propane-filled room. Ben blinks. Once or twice, then exclaimed too loudly and fakely. The voice rose half a tone higher than normal to say it wasn't like that. Merger, strategic alliance of shared interests. Grandma frowned. She stated the only way grandmas can, when they know you're full but want to watch you squirm longer. I said nothing. Not yet. You don't waste a first shot when the truth is loaded. You want impact. Ben didn't know, and no one at that table saved me, and Grandma knew that I'd watched his company go downhill for 8 months. I acted when the board was desperate, layoffs hit, and morale was low. He was clean, legal, efficient, and on my org chart. Despite not wanting revenge, it tasted like it. An Easter meal was served. My brother was red-faced, my parents astonished, and my grandmother smiled like a cat who knocked a vase down and challenged you to chastise her. That moment has no sequel, just silent. Pure pain, lovely quiet. The truth sometimes rings loudest in the room no one saw coming. I knew there was more when I grabbed the gravy. The beautiful mirror my brother had erected around himself had its first break. I would let it fall apart with the nicest grin, as Grandma taught me. Have you noticed how certain families don't hide their favorites? It wasn't subtle for us. Ben was the golden child from the moment he was born, with full hair and a smug cry like he owned the place. I arrived 3 years later, quieter, squishier, and appearing more like an afterthought than a plan. Mom always said I was her surprise. However, throughout the years, I felt like the consolation prize for parents too fatigued to focus on a second child. Ben was applauded. Got the checklists. He had everything before I knew I wanted it as a kid. First bike, sparkling red, handpicked from town's best store. When I could ride, I got his old one, spray-painted blue with wonky wheels. The first car was a second-hand but clean Civic with a stereo that annoyed the neighbors. Mine? Mom's old Taurus reeked of foot and misery. They termed his ambition. It was luck or background noise when I did well. I wasn't mad, not then. Anger needs heat. So I had frigid resolve, a slow burn, and a quiet inventory I started keeping in my thoughts. Ben was boisterous, charismatic, and famous. Homecoming court, varsity, soccer, dean's list. Every family portrait showed him front and center, chest out like he created confidence. I was usually blinking or holding someone else's jacket near the frame's edge. Ben was touted as destined. Maybe politics, business, anything bright and significant. In the 90s, being quiet, smart, and into computers meant we didn't know what he was doing, but at least he wasn't doing drugs. Nothing was said about it in college. With confidence and student loans, Ben got into MIT early. The whole family barbecued like he was drafted by NASA. I didn't receive a card at community college 3 towns away. It didn't bother me. I realized early on I'd never win by playing his game, and trying to outshine Ben at his parade would get me squashed. Instead, I played another game. Longer deadlines, fewer applause, higher stakes. Then studied in impressive-sounding computer science with a minor in business and interned at well-known companies in the summers. I freelanced under a bogus firm name because clients wouldn't take me seriously. I developed websites, maintained networks, and coded like my future depended on it. Honestly, it did. I remember calling him the summer after his junior year for aid with a problem. Brother to brother, he might throw me a bone. He laughed hard, like I'd asked him to clean my toilet or do my taxes. Advised me to Google it like everyone else. I never forgot. It stung, but it revealed his true nature beneath the polish. It told me to never ask him again. Then I got serious. I quit community college because I realized I didn't need a degree to achieve what I was building. Self-taught the rest. By messing up and starting over, I learned more than I can count. I learned to develop in 3 languages, launched little tools and apps, flipped a few ventures, and built a company no one had heard of, but produced real money. I silently built my own while Ben meticulously calculated how to impress the next management up the line. Over the years, we drifted like 2 ships in different currents. He wore expensive outfits to family functions, promoting his company's latest product, and bragging about bonuses and conferences. I arrived in jeans, generally late, spoke little, and left early. I enjoyed that no one knew what I did. They thought I was coasting, doing freelance work or living in a basement. Let them. I didn't require approval. I needed time. I'd learned to invest time better than them, thankfully. As Ben's companies began to fail, I saw it first. I tracked the trends, layoffs, terrible hires, and bloated structure. I observed their burn rate rise. I made some calls when the board started talking about restructuring. My organization had finances, leverage, and most importantly, no emotional baggage. I didn't target Ben. I targeted waste, opportunity, and mismanagement. I appreciated his inclusion in the bundle as a cosmic joke. I sat alone in my office with the signed acquisition contract the night before Easter supper. The ink hardly dried. Having read it a dozen times, it still feels unreal. This document places my older brother's profession, ego, and story under my name. That wasn't revenge. Not even victory. Another, quieter thing, like scratching a 30-year-old itch. Not perfect, but necessary. I could have told my parents then. Could have contacted Ben to warn him and save face. I didn't because some realities aren't gentle. Some realities need cautious disclosure, especially with the whole friggin' family watching. Especially when your 90-year-old grandma, who never doubted you and has sharper eyes than investors, understands what you've done before you say a thing. The room felt cold, like someone had neglected to close a freezer door. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The hush seemed uneasy. It was shaped like thick smoke curling between each word spoken, wrapping over every fork, napkin, and untouched deviled egg on that long oak table. My brother Ben sat there, jaw slightly open, blinking like a shotgun hit him between the eyes. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. After Grandma burnt him in front of everyone, you couldn't respond with a joke or grin. You can't joke about your baby brother owning the company you left. Not even Ben, master of the arrogant shrug and corporate language, could polish that turd. Since I knew he was about to delve deeper, I took a slow sip of my wine to let it linger and give him space to do so. Mom, bless her endless optimism, leaped in like a person who sees a car crash coming but yet thinks they can stop it with a soothing voice and a shoulder touch. She mentioned that firms merge often, that it's business, and that we shouldn't talk shop over dinner. Her voice was lovely, but her eyes were begging, darting between us like she could make this moment less humiliating for her firstborn. Dad didn't say a word, which was expected. Except for losing football games or making mistakes at work, he rarely showed emotion. He kept biting his overdone ham like rubber, trying to wear it down with jaw muscle. But I saw it in his shoulders, how they stiffened up, and how he grasped his fork too hard. He was dissatisfied while listening. Ben finally found his voice, but it cracked. "Not what you think," he answered, attempting to maintain his haughty attitude. "I don't work for him anymore. A merger. Two equal firms merging. Standard strategy." I didn't glance at him. Cut my cold potatoes into a passive-aggressive insult-like shape and let him keep going. He said, "We're consolidating leadership," sounding like a news release. "Transitional phase. Things don't change overnight." See him lie to himself in real time? Funny. Perhaps if he repeated it enough times, the sinking ship he was guiding would suddenly return to course because he refused to believe it had hit an iceberg. Then he turned to me like he remembered me in the room. He added, cocking his head in the way that usually got him out of trouble, "You'd be confused. You freelance more, right?" That phrase freelancer lingered there like a disease or nasty habit I couldn't break. He said it softly, but with that sharpness he saved for when he wanted to cut me in front of others without looking like the aggressor. It was then I said it. I told him. My voice calmed the surgeon who signed your severance package last week. The punch didn't feel real. It felt like turning on a light. There was tension in the room. Next, I held a mirror up to him to show him what we'd known for years. He blinked again, looked at me like I was speaking another language. Like they'd changed our lives' rules without him knowing. They did because I wasn't letting him talk over me for the first time. I didn't dodge or ignore his jabs. I let it be raw and basic. No need for fireworks. Dad stood up then. He stood slowly, softly, pushed his chair back like it weighed more than it should, and left the room without saying anything. Silence, footsteps, no spectacular retreat or angry glance. That was worse because if he'd yelled, it would have been expected. As in a novel, this quiet feels definitive, like closing a door you know won't open again. Ben stared after him, mouth twitching like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Mom reached for his hand, but he pulled away, staring at the corridor where Dad had vanished. Grandma chewed her carrots slowly, as if she'd seen it all before and wasn't startled. I stayed put. I didn't brag. I didn't need to, since some triumphs aren't loud. Cheers and applause are absent. Silence settles in your chest, and makes it hard to breathe, not from sadness, but from the weight of truth, finally settled in. As I looked around the table at the folks who used to perceive me as the shadow of the man opposite from me, I realized something I hadn't dared accept until then. No more proof was needed. No to him, Dad, or them. One already. No master plan or vendetta I'd been carrying for 20 years started it. No. It begins quietly and contemplatively, like most of my important things. My lean-focused company has grown steadily for 5 years. No investors hounding us, no bloated leadership team, just a few smart people who cared about it working. We weren't flashy. We didn't attend every conference in TechCrunch or Patagonia vests. We produced products that worked and made money month after month without approval. While high management conducted yoga retreats and published cryptic LinkedIn statements about resilience, Ben's company earned publicity for announcing things it hadn't created, having launch parties for beta products, and hemorrhaging personnel. I'd been watching them slowly break apart from afar for almost a year, not because I hated them, but because I noticed inefficiencies. Ben's company, once a darling, was a textbook example of how arrogance and overspending can wreck something excellent. During coffee, a friend casually said that they might be seeking a partner, like the weather. "You know they're bleeding talent," he said, tapping his mug. Wouldn't surprise me if they started shopping around. I smiled and nodded, but my brain had already started crunching numbers, pulling threads, and laying out a map in the quiet way it always does when I smell blood in the water. Because timing is everything, especially in this business, I waited. 3 months later, a contact at a shared venture capital firm emailed me to feel me out. Informal discussion about potential synergies. Translation: they're desperate and you look stable. I played it cool, even though I knew what I wanted. I wasn't interested in bailing them out, but I was interested in their engineering talent, key patents, and customer base that overlapped with ours in all the right ways. I told them we could talk, but quietly. No leaks, no hype, just numbers and structure. Negotiations were slow. They're never when you're dealing with egos the size of small planets. But what struck me from the start was how nobody mentioned Ben. He wasn't on the deck, on the call, or even in the background, which told me everything I needed to know about his situation. They had written him off, boxed him in, and were trying to clean up the mess without saying failure. I was in my office late on a Thursday, when the air felt thick with momentum, and decisions felt like physical objects you could hold in your hand. The document arrived in a password-protected folder with a generic subject line, just another piece of paper in a stack. When I opened it, there it was. Ben Keller, Director of Product Development, reporting directly to me. I stared at that box for a long time, not smiling, not gloating, just still. It was surreal. I hadn't seen his name in a context where I had authority over it since we were kids, when I had to manage the score sheets for our backyard basketball games because I couldn't play without them. I kept score again, but this time the game wasn't pretend and the points were real. I didn't tell anyone. Not my girlfriend, my co-founder, not even Grandma. I let it sit in my chest like a stone dropped in a lake. Ripples spreading quietly outward. Gloating implies you need the wind to validate yourself. I wasn't prepared for Easter. I should have been. I should have seen it coming when Grandma asked what I'd been working on lately and I gave her a vague answer about acquisitions. She saw through it instantly as she always did, but I didn't think she'd drop the bomb at dinner. I thought she'd pull me aside in the kitchen, give me a knowing look, maybe sarcastic, and say, "So I guess you're the boss now." But she said it out loud, with that razor-sharp calm that chilled the room like a family drama with terrible lighting and even worse secrets. After the tension, silence, and Ben's attempt to spin it, which I answered with a single sentence, he waited until dessert was cleared to corner me, pulled me aside with a firm hand on my arm to make a point, and led me out onto the back deck like we were having a heart-to-heart instead of a showdown. "What the hell?" he snarled, his voice harsh and low and full of something that wasn't quite anger but damn close to panic. "You couldn't just let it go." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw it for the first time. He wasn't mad that I beat him. He was scared because I wasn't playing the game anymore. I'd rewritten the rules and he didn't even know what page we were on. Worse, he still thought it was salvageable. He thought he could talk his way out. He didn't get that it was already done, final, signed, and filed. So I said nothing and looked out at the yard where we used to play catch, where he threw too hard on purpose, and I pretended it didn't. The night air had that brittle chill you only get in early spring, like winter hadn't fully let go yet, and neither had we. The back porch creaked under our feet like old wood does when it's trying to warn you that what's coming can't be undone. His face had lost that calm, smug control he wore like a badge of honor. Now it was raw, flushed, jaw tight like he was chewing on glass, but couldn't spit it out. "You planned this," he said. No question, no real charge. More like a desperate grasp for a less pitiful outcome. "Everything was planned by you. You've been waiting for me to fall so you may play hero or villain. Not even sure which one you think you are anymore." I delayed responding. I leaned against the rail and watched the backyard, the same plot of grass where we used to play till someone wept. I generally get it from him pressing too hard and calling it a joke. The same ground where we buried a time capsule convinced us we'd be legends by now. Ben approached, his voice rising, his fingers twitching as he struggled to control his wrath. "You always hated me for being better," he added, fiery. "Smarter, faster, more driven. You never had the guts to play at my level, so you waited till I slipped and kicked me. Noble Ethan." I turned slowly, calmly, and met his eyes with clarity, not rage, pain, or pride, just the stillness of someone who didn't need his approval anymore. "You never outshone me," I said. "Don't raise my voice, don't rush my words." That struck like a truth so simple it couldn't be argued with. Ben flinched barely, and I saw the shift. His eyes narrowed, his body coiled, and he stepped forward and grabbed a fistful of my shirt in one fluid, reflexive motion. Old habits die hard. He'd done that same move 100 times when we were kids on the field, in the hallway, in the garage, when I touched his stuff. The alpha act, the chest puffing that always got him what he wanted because no one called him on it. Not teachers, not our parents, and not me until now. But I didn't flinch this time. I stood there still as stone, letting him feel the difference. Ben, I said quietly, my voice a scalpel. And I don't work for you. For a second, he stood there, knuckles white, face inches from mine. Then he let go slowly, fingers trembling like he wanted to hit something but knew it wouldn't help. He took a step back and laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that cracked under the weight of everything he didn't want to admit. You think this makes you a better man? He asked shakily. You think buying my firm makes you valuable? I never needed to buy your company to be worth something, I replied, turning back to the yard. But you had to buy it to prove that. The kitchen window light was on behind us. Grandma stood there, one hand on the counter, the other stirring something she probably didn't plan to serve, but her eyes were sharp as ever, watching us like the final judge in a courtroom we hadn't realized we'd entered. She smiled, just a faint curve at the corner of her mouth. Ben didn't see her. Or maybe he did, but he couldn't face what she meant to smile. He took another step back, shook his head and said, You're not who I was. I didn't reply because what was there to say? He was right. I wasn't. I had spent too many years pretending that silence meant weakness, humility meant submission, and success wasn't real unless someone else confirmed it. But now, standing on the back porch with his fingers still warm from trying to drag me back into that old dynamic, I knew better. I had left that version of myself behind, and maybe that's why he was so angry. For the first time in his life he couldn't reach me, rattle me or win. I didn't need to say anything else. The house was mostly settled by then. After a storm, it is always quiet, but tense and loaded. Like the walls were still processing what they'd heard and didn't know how to hold it all. The dishes were stacked in the sink, the table was cleared without ceremony, and the family had scattered to different corners of the house like survivors drifting from a shipwreck. Mom was upstairs folding laundry that didn't need folding. Ben was locked in the downstairs guest room pretending to check emails, and Dad had disappeared into the garage where he concentrated to retreat when things cracked enough to show feelings he didn't want to name in me. I stood alone in the kitchen with the dim light casting long shadows on the linoleum floor, trying to remember how a holiday had become a battleground Grandma entered without saying a word. Clicking like she always did, slow but steady, slippers brushing the tile, nightgown rustling softly, eyes clear and focused despite the hour. She moved to the stove, checked a pot she'd long since turned off, and stirred it once with a wooden spoon like the act helped her think. I was leaning against the counter, arms folded, and we just existed in that space together, saying nothing but speaking volumes. Then she turned to me with that familiar gaze as sharp as at dinner, and nodded toward the den's back hallway. Come on, she said, not as a request, but as assurance. I followed her down the hall, past the creaky floorboard near the bathroom, into the small wood-paneled room where she kept her little treasures for decades. Old books, faded photos, flea market knickknacks she claimed were antiques, and the constant smell of lemon polish and lavender. She sat slowly in her old recliner, motioned for me to take the chair across from her, and reached into the side table drawer without looking. Her hand came out with something wrapped in a worn cloth, something she'd clearly kept hidden for a long time. She gently unwrapped it, and it was Grandpa's watch. It was a simple piece, not flashy or expensive, but it had weight. Not just physical weight, though it was solid in your pawn, heavier than it looked, but history, expectations, and all the silent glances and unspoken lessons Grandpa used to give us when he was alive. Everyone in the family assumed it would go to Ben. The firstborn, the man of action. The one who talks about legacy and honor and continuing the family name like we're royalty instead of middle-class Indianans who paid bills on time and kept Christmas decorations in the attic. She gave it to me. She placed it in my open hand like she was transferring a responsibility, rather than a possession. Your grandfather told me to give it to the one who reminded him most of himself. Quiet, unpraised and determined. I stared at the watch. The way the scratched glass caught the light. The leather band had molded to Grandpa's wrist and was ready to take on mine. I didn't say anything because I had 1,000 questions, but because I knew this was a time for receiving. He needs attention, she said after a beat. Eyes not leaving mine. Always did since he was a boy. He's not bad, just hollow in ways he doesn't understand. But you never needed the applause. You just needed time. Something caught in my throat then. Not a sob, not a tear. Just something heavy and unfinished that had been stuck there since I was maybe 10 years old, watching my brother get handed things with open arms while I got instructions and told the door crept behind us. And we turned to see Dad, silent as always, holding a mug of coffee that had probably gone cold. His eyes dropped to the watch in my hand, and he had no expression, just the stonewall face he always wore when emotion tried to show. But then something changed. Just barely. A tightening around the eyes. A softening of the jaw. Not approval, not forgiveness. Just recognition, acknowledgement, maybe even a whisper of regret. He didn't speak. Just nodded once and turned away. Footsteps echoing down the hall with the weight of a man who wishes he'd seen things sooner. Maybe wished he'd asked different questions, looked in different directions. Or maybe that was just me projecting. Either way, his silence said more than words. I looked at Grandma again. She was watching him disappear, then turned to me, eyes gleaming slightly. Some things can't be bought, she said slowly and confidently. But some people, oh, they're for sale, all right. She leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and exhaled like a woman who had just finished the last chapter of a story only she understood. I sat there with that watch in my hand, feeling every moment that had led to this one. Not angry, not triumphant, just still. And that was enough. Monday mornings in tech are usually a mix of chaos and caffeine. Unread emails scream from every tab. Slack messages pile up faster than your thoughts can organize, and calendar invites feel like handcuffs. However, this Monday was quiet in a way that felt orchestrated, like the moment before a string quartet started playing in a hushed theater. When I entered the office, there was no tension, no whispering rumors in the break room, no sudden movements. Just a strange calmness. Like the building knew something had been removed and was adjusted to the new weight. Ben's name was gone from the system by 9:30. No internal memo, no all-hands meeting, no we wish him well on his journey. Just empty corporate platitude. His profile was wiped from the org chart, his desk was cleared, and his access badge was deactivated in the admin log. It was the quietest resignation I'd ever seen. It feels heavier than if he had gone out with a bang, a tantrum, or a smug LinkedIn essay about pivoting into new opportunities. By noon, my inbox was full of emails from current and former employees who had waited for this moment like the weather. The messages weren't long and didn't need to be. Just a steady stream of thank you took long enough, and he was a nightmare to work for. A few were more personal. One engineer said Ben had taken credit for his work 3 quarters in a row. Another described being screamed at during a Zoom call for asking about project timelines. A woman from HR wrote that she had reported his behavior to higher-ups and was told to document more thoroughly next time, as his toxicity needed a spreadsheet to be acknowledged. As I read each word, line, and pixelated gratitude, something strange and unfamiliar began to stir in me. It wasn't pride or vindication but a quieter sense of responsibility. Maybe the weight of knowing that when you remove a tyrant, you have to rebuild the wreckage. That afternoon my phone buzzed with Mom. She never called during work hours unless it was urgent or emotional, usually both. I stared at the screen, wondering if she knew, how she knew, and what she wanted to say that couldn't wait until the next family gathering where she could smooth over the cracks with casseroles and nervous smiles. On the 4th ring, she was crying. Not sobbing or hysterical, just that soft, breathy kind of crying where every word sounds like it's pushing through a storm. She asked why I hadn't told her, how long I'd known, and what happened to the little boys who used to play with Legos on the living room floor, building castles, robots, and towers out of plastic and dreams and sibling rivalry. Why didn't you speak up? She asked, voice trembling. And the answer came so easily, I didn't even pause. Because I wanted a brother, I said. Not a rival. She didn't respond at first. Just breathed. Let the silence carry all the things neither of us could name. I think deep down she knew not about the company or the deal or the power shift, but about the fracture, the long, slow drift between us that had started years ago and had only grown wider with every month. Perhaps she cried because I waited so long to stop pretending everything was fine. After the call, I sat in my office alone, lights dimmed, door closed, the kind of stillness that only comes after emotional fallout. I leaned back in my chair, hands steepled beneath my chin, thinking not about the company, staff, or budget meetings ahead. I wondered if Ben, the boy with the scraped knees and the crooked grin who laughed too loud and threw baseballs too hard, would ever forgive me or himself. When I got home that evening, the sky was already twilight. I kicked off my shoes, loosened my collar, and dropped my bag by the door. On the kitchen counter was an envelope. It was heavy, not physically, but in a way that feels old and waiting. No name on the front. No return address. I stared at it for longer than I should have, the edges soft under my fingers, the paper thick and folded with care. I don't know why. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I didn't want to know what was inside because not knowing still held possibilities. Words of apology, anger, and a final declaration from a man who had never been big on words. I put it in my desk drawer, unopened, and that was enough for now. Thanksgiving came around like it always does, just cold enough to make your breath visible in the morning, and sentimental enough to bring families back together, ready or not. The leaves were mostly gone, scattered across the lawn like forgotten promises, and the house felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe because fewer voices were filling it. Or maybe because silence makes the walls feel closer. Either way, the air was different this time, not just from the season, but from the absence that sat at the table like a ghost in a folding chair. Ben wasn't there. His name wasn't directly mentioned, not in a way that opened the door to a real conversation, but he was everywhere in the gaps. The empty seat, the untouched place setting that Mom laid out anyway like muscle memory, had overridden common sense. Dad kept glancing at it without realizing it. It was more like grief, but without the clarity of death to make sense of it. A slow mourning for something that had cracked but never quite broken, still sharp enough to bleed but not broken enough to bury. Mom was distant, like someone caught between traditions she didn't want to lose and a reality she couldn't accept. She smiled when she had to, refilled glasses too often, and kept asking everyone if they were warm enough, like it was a question that might fix something if asked again. I caught her looking at me more than once, not with blame, but with that soft, searching gaze only mothers have, the kind that scans your face like it might reveal the child she used to know buried beneath whatever you'd grown. Dad nodded at me when I walked in, a gesture so small and restrained it might have gone unnoticed if I hadn't been waiting for anything more. He didn't speak to me until I was halfway through my second helping of mashed potatoes, and even then, it was just a weather comment, used as bait. Grandma was there, of course, in her usual chair by the window, watching the wind play with the trees and the neighborhood kids tossing footballs between driveways. She looked smaller than she did at Easter, like time had finally started pressing on her shoulder, but her eyes were still sharp, still watching, still cataloging everything in that quiet, knowing way she had. When we met, she smiled gently, not wide or smug, just satisfied that a long game had finally fallen. I went to the den, the old wood-paneled room that still smelled like her perfume, dust, and old books. I sat at her desk, the same place I'd sat months earlier when she gave me Grandpa's watch. This time, I pulled out the envelope that had been waiting patiently in my desk drawer since Dad left it for me. I hadn't opened it because unopened things have potential. Hope, regret, praise, disappointment. Until you read the words. But that night, with the house humming softly and a half-healed family pressing against the windows like cold air, I opened it. There was only one line. You were always enough. I didn't know how to say it. I read it once, then again, and again, and then I sat back in the chair, stinging like I hadn't felt in years, not since I was a kid, and scraping my knee so hard the blood pulled in my sock. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him, Ben, or the years I'd spent chasing a version of success I thought I needed to prove something. The tears came slowly, not dramatic, just real. Perhaps I needed to prove it to realize I didn't. When I rejoined the others, the house was dimmer, quieter, full of leftover smells, half-drunk wine, and half-heard laughter. I watched Mom hug my cousin goodbye like she might break if she let go too fast. Grandma looked at me one last time before I left and said, "Good. Now keep going." As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I realized the real inheritance wasn't the watch, letter, or nod from my father. It was knowing that I had survived the story they wrote for me and rewritten it without permission. Maybe I won. Maybe I lost something bigger trying to prove I didn't need to. But some dinners change everything, and some silences say more than applause. Would you have spoken up at dinner, or let him believe the lie? Thanks for watching and being part of the drama. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a wild news story. My husband once let his family humiliate and discard me. 7 years later, I returned under a different name and bought their entire company. My husband's family always considered me unworthy. He consented and pulled away. 7 years later, we met at a corporate gala. I wasn't recognized. I grinned and gave him an unexpected contract. Our corporation bought his family's business. Quiet ensued. Jason's coffee mug fell over when I slammed the folder on our kitchen counter, spilling black liquid on his white shirt. The hell is this? My voice shaking, finger pointing at the proof. My background checks me like a criminal. Jason's face went white when he saw his mother's handwriting on the Eva background manila folder. Private detectives his family hired revealed everything. My parents' low income, school loans, and images of my small childhood home. Each page included Lena's exquisite calligraphy. Unsuitable. Common. Unfined. Let me explain, Claire. Jason grabbed my hand, but I retreated. Betrayal burns like new. Was this known before you proposed? Though tears threatened, I refused to satisfy them. My first look behind the Wright family facade. I didn't realize it was just the start. I met Nick at a charity function where I coordinated events. He was kind and interested in my sustainable business ideas. 6 months later, he proposed, and I thought I'd met my equal. My diamond ring blinded me to the warning flags. His small hesitancy while introducing me to his mother, his father's appraising eyes, and the whisper discussions that halted when I entered the rooms. Jason's mother, Vivian, called me about the engagement party 3 weeks before finding the folder. Nothing spectacular, she promised with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, just family and close friends. Wright Estate included 5 acres of beautiful lawns and gardens. Valets in pristine uniforms parked visitors' fancy automobiles, while wait servants carried champagne and d'oeuvres. For Vivian, this meant nothing fancy. Under crystal chandeliers, 200 Boston elite mingle. Jason left within minutes of our arrival, taken by his father to meet an old governor acquaintance. I was alone with my pocketbook as a protection, when an older server approached. Miss Thompson. Mrs. Wright requested I show you to your dinner seat. He led me through a swinging door from the great dining room, where tables were being set with beautiful china and silver, to a smaller area where staff were preparing trays. There must be some mistake, I replied, peering at the solitary place setting between multiple napkins and water images. The server's eyes showed pity. The main room laughed, humiliating me. Mrs. Wright was very specific. She said you'd be more comfortable here, observing how proper service is conducted. Jason discovered me still immobilized with astonishment 20 minutes later. Claire, why are you back here? Everyone sits. He seemed confused, so I wondered if he didn't realize what his mother had done, or if he was just a better actress. Vivian smiled during his lead to the main table. Unfortunately, the seating chart was misinterpreted. You might like seeing how things work behind the scenes, Claire. You're an event planner. Therefore the emphasis lets everyone understand. Not a guest. I was staff who stumbled into their world. That night I questioned Jason about his mother's actions. In frustration he cried, raking his hair. With me, not his family. Old-fashioned Claire from mom. She just needs time to acclimate. She expected me to marry Elle or Gia. Our lifelong friends. People with the proper lineage? I found the word bitter. His silence was confirmed. The pattern persisted. Mark, Jason's father and Wright Delicacies CEO, called me to his office one afternoon. Gourmet cuisine sold in high-end stores nationwide was made by the family business for generations. A refurbished downtown structure with elegant metal and mahogany housed the headquarters. I arrived in a new suit, hoping for an olive branch. Maybe Thomas finally realized my business degree could help the family business. Claire. He nodded without standing or shaking hands. Jason said you've been job hunting since graduation. I might feel hope. Officer. I focused on marketing and product development. Thomas treated me like a somewhat fascinating specimen under a microscope. A mailroom opening exists. It will teach you the basics of company operations where you belong. We were separated by the deliberate insult. My degree is in business, I whispered. He replied with Westfield State honors, showing his scorn. A privilege, Claire. No matter where they started, most people will jump at the chance to enter here. As I reached our bedroom door that night, I heard Jason on the phone. Dad, you can't really offer her the mailroom. His quiet, defensive voice gave me hope before he continued. Yes, she needs to earn her place. But I held my breath, pressing closer to the door. You're right, Jason answered after a lengthy silence. She can improve. She may attend workplace events with guidance. I know my undertaking, treating me like a burden or project. I traced the engagement ring, which now feels like a collar instead of affection. I kept telling myself Jason would stand up to them, and that he loved me for who I was, not what they wanted. The ultimate humiliation arrived in a silver box a week before our wedding. Inside was an Elizabeth Morrison finishing school certificate. The 12-week executive spouse program covers table manners and French conversation. Vivian wrote, "Maybe this will help you belong. Best wishes, Mother." My hands trembled as I showed Jason, expecting, hoping he would finally be just as furious. But his face brightened. "Mom's trying. Claire, this is considerate. You can traverse our environment with these talents. Your world." The words escaped before I could stop them. I thought we built our planet together. I was patronized by his forehead kiss. Yes, we are. You must acknowledge you weren't taught some things as a child. Filling in gaps. As we stood in our kitchen with the gifts, I should have left. It should have been obvious that Nick would never choose me above his family. He basically agreed with their evaluation of my worth. Instead, I walked down the aisle 3 days later with my father's arm around me, and my mother wiping proud tears in the front row. The right side of the church was crowded with politicians, cos, and old-money Boston families who watched me with courteous smiles and calculating looks. Your marriage is announced. Vivian looked over Jason's shoulder as he placed the wedding band next to my engagement ring. She won with her smile. The message was plain. The struggle had only begun, but she thought she was winning. Who knew that behind my tearful bridal smile lurked a hardened heart? Their brutality will plant the seed of strength to leave and take what they value. First, I'll discover my opponent. The Wright family made marriage like slow-motion drowning. Each day, another inch of water rose around me, but no one noticed or cared. First Thanksgiving as a married couple should have been fun. The ritual of exclusion repeated at every family gathering afterward. We met at the Wright estate, where Thomas ceremonially sliced the turkey and Vivian commanded the staff. I stood behind Jason adjusting my carefully chosen dress for family photos. Vivian agreed grudgingly. "Claire, why not take the picture?" Her voice tastes poisonous. Vivian said, "You see these things well." A camera was forced into my hands before I could answer. I saw the Wright family via the viewfinder. Now my family is meant to be an ideal formation. Jason sat between his parents without looking back. Smile. My empty voice obsesses me. Jason shrugged when I mentioned it later. Mom just wants lovely family photos. We'll join you next time. Next time never comes. At Christmas, I was sent to the kitchen to check on dessert as the photographer arrived. My Easter assignment was to entertain distant cousins' children for the family portrait. Jason gets stronger and practices his excuses. Like a ghost haunting their immaculate tableau, I am there but unrepresented in the Wright family history. After 6 months of marriage, Jason started placing fashion magazines on our coffee table with articles about subtle beauty changes. "Darling," he remarked one evening as I browsed another magazine he'd left out. "Imagine doing something with your nose. A little tweak." I reflexively touched my nose. Problems with my nose? Jason sat next to me, holding my hand. Nothing wrong with it. Just Mom mentioned. He resisted, but too late. "Your mother discussed my nose." A smack hurt instantly. "She only wants what's best for us," Jason added in that pompous tone I'd come to hate. "The annual shareholders meeting is coming up. You'll be photographed for the company newsletter." She suggested presenting the best family brand image. You mean my voice froze? Indeed, it's vital. You now reflect me, and I reflect the organization. The recommendations increased in frequency and specificity. My hair was boring. Adding highlights may add class. My jawline needs shaping. My casual walk lacked proper posture. I became a project that never met specs as each criticism eroded my identity. The confidence that helped Jason recognize me at that charity event evaporated like a sun-damaged photo. An annual Wright Foundation charity gala commemorated our 1-year milestone. I spent weeks planning, examining guest lists, remembering Boston's affluent family's ties, and rehearsing small talk about relevant themes. Jason persuaded me to have Vivian's exquisite updo, which made me look more like her. I wore a black dress that cost more than my first car to watch Jason dazzle investors and business associates that night. Vivian approached a silver-haired man in a suit. "Charles, I'd like you to meet Jennifer, Jason's wife," she added, touching my arm. Charles looked between me, detecting tension. "Oh, of course, Claire." Vivian's giggle tinkled like shattered glass. "I was thinking of Jennifer Lopez. Doesn't she look like her, Charles? Something about the features." Jason watched with a tight smile, saying nothing. Later, Vivian introduced me as Jessica to a judge and Kathy to a congressman's wife. Each time Jason's defense weakened until he stopped correcting her. "It's just a slip of the tongue," he said on the way home. "Mom meets hundreds at these events. You're being oversensitive. It's been a long night." He turned away, ending the conversation. That night, while Jason slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when I had become invisible in my marriage. On an ordinary Tuesday, Jason left his briefcase in the hall when he rushed out for an early meeting. I noticed it while going to coffee with a friend, my increasingly rare attempt to live outside the right orbit. I grabbed the briefcase and planned to drop it off at his office. My car tipped over, spilling some contents onto the passenger seat. As I gathered the papers, my hand froze over a small pharmacy paper bag with 2 pregnancy test kits and a yellow sticky note. "Vanessa, potential mother of a true right heir. Pick up champagne if positive." The handwriting was Vivian's, and the implication was devastating. Who is Vanessa? My mind races through every conversation, event, and introduction. Then I remembered Tina, Senator Hall's daughter, who had attended several rite functions. Tall, blonde, meticulously bred, with Mayflower ancestry. Everything I wasn't. I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, and gave the briefcase to Jason's assistant without seeing him. That night, I waited for him to explain or lie to me, but he said he'd be working late all week on the annual company retreat in the Berkshires this weekend. I inquired calmly, "All CEOs and their spouses?" My eyes were ignored. "You shouldn't come this year. Mom advises keeping it professional. Negotiating with foreign partners under pressure." Family retreats were always held. The spouse was always included. Another no-go. Another erase. "I understood more than he thought," I said. I decided Friday morning when Jason left for the retreat. I traveled to the Wright's magnificent Berkshire Lodge, where they entertained key clients. I parked down the road and took the customary woods trail to the back of the home. All of them were visible from the main lodge's floor-to-ceiling windows. Thomas addressing executives, Vivian overseeing personnel, company officials mingling, and Jason sitting closely with a blonde woman on a quiet couch near the fireplace. She held his arm as they chuckled about something private. I stood still while Vivian smiled at them. I couldn't hear her toast as she handed them champagne glasses. It wasn't necessary. Celebration was obvious. Every smile, touch, and furtive gaze revealed their future without me. I saw my reflection in the darkened glass as I left, numb with the final affirmation of my disposability. A ghost at the limits of their universe viewing a life that was never mine. I realized the gradual disintegration of my confidence, identity, and family place that night alone in Jason and my purportedly shared house. Everything led up to this. I wasn't married. I was a placeholder till someone better arrived. I have nothing to do with them. While drying my tears and packing, I made a silent pledge to myself. I shall be everything someday. I signed the divorce papers steadily despite my broken heart. Wright family attorney looked at me with a hint of contempt. A man who had spent a month bullying me into accepting nothing while leaving. "You know that, by waiving alimony, you're just entitled to what you contributed into the marriage," he added condescendingly. I looked at him and said, "I know what I'm leaving." He didn't realize I'd taken something more important than money. I worked late for 3 weeks, methodically copying information from Jason's home office as Jason worked late with Vanessa. Supplier agreements, production schedules, contract details. Jason, certain of my insignificance, never hid his work files. He'd soon forget our wedding date, his password. Documents revealed Wright Delicacies' entire supply network. They rely on 3 suppliers for their distinctive ingredients. Exclusivity contracts expiring in 2 years, and their startling markup on artisanal products mass-produced in low-quality facilities. A folder on international expansion was most beneficial. A 5-year strategy by Mark to sell watered-down luxury items in Asia. Profits would soar and quality suffer. Solid business practices. I left the attorney's office with only my clothes, business degree, and the appropriate family's vulnerabilities. They believed I left empty-handed. It was clear I was leaving with everything. First stop. Not a new apartment or friend's sofa. A bus station with a one-way ticket to Portland, Oregon, was as distant from Boston's crowded social circles as I could get. Distance wasn't just geographical, existential. Claire Wright will die and be reborn as Eva. Portland welcomed me with misty mornings and coffee shop owners. I pre-rented a modest studio above a bookstore for 3 months. My final savings. I felt something unexpected that first night on a bare mattress with rain knocking on the windows. Freedom. The metamorphosis started the next morning. I went to a salon with long Wright-approved brown hair and left with a bright auburn bob that would have made Vivian gasp. A kind-eyed stylist with tattoo sleeves examined my face as I sat in her chair. "This isn't just a haircut, is it?" she questioned as she cut. "It's an exorcism," I said, watching my old existence crumble. The wardrobe followed. The traditional outfits and pearls that never fit me were gone. I like expressive colors and patterns. Every new item was announced, not what they made me. Final touch was unexpected. A voice and speech coach flyer caught my eye outside a theater. After performing on Broadway, Patricia now helps people find their voice. In our first session, she nodded knowingly as I spoke. She noted your training to soften your cadence, to round your vowels and copy others. Boston Brahmin patterns, I think. I didn't realize how much I'd internalized Vivian's speech training and had to eradicate my childhood Midwestern inflections. I told Patricia I want my voice back. I speak, not just sound. Something happened over the next 3 months as I regained my authentic speech patterns. Also, I found my voice in business. The plan developed. Everything changed with the letter. Grandmother Rose died peacefully in her sleep. When I was young, we were close, but the proper years separated us. Yet another relationship lost to my marriage. Along with my mourning came an unexpected legacy from her death. $30,000 and a box of belongings. Money saved the day. But the box was priceless. She possessed 1960s journals from her time as a recipe developer for Heartland Harvest, a tiny specialty foods firm. Her preservation recipes use unusual fruit and herb combinations. Strangely familiar recipes. One September 1967 entry struck my eye. Today, Mr. Wright toured the facility, cared about my blackberry sage preserve, asked several questions about herb-sweet balance, calls it groundbreaking. I'm flattered but suspicious of his interest. 3 months later, H. Heartland abruptly shuttered. Sales to investors. They said, "Today, I saw my blackberry sage preserve in stores with the Wright Delicacies label. No credit, no compensation. Mr. Mark Sr. stole my work and is making a fortune. No one will believe a woman over a powerful man." I sat among my grandmother's things, stunned. The irony was almost too perfect. Wright Delicacies had been built on theft, just as their son had stolen years of my life. Grandmother Rose had given me more than seed money. She'd given me moral clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, reclaiming what had been taken from both of us. Mira, Wright's product development director until last year, and I met over coffee. Margaret's bitterness and insider knowledge spilled out. Thomas had me develop this whole line of organic, sustainably sourced products. I created everything. He pulled the plug, saying it wasn't on brand. 2 weeks later I was laid off because my position was redundant. She leaned forward, voice dropping. "But Thomas is wrong. The market is shifting towards sustainability. Delicacies are so focused on tradition that they can't see the future. They're vulnerable." Margaret wasn't the only one. I systematically connected with 6 former Wright employees, each sharing pieces of the puzzle. David from accounting revealed their cash flow weaknesses. Zoe from marketing explained how their brand was failing to connect with younger consumers. Carlos from operations described their outdated production facilities. Each conversation was casual and each relationship was cultivated without revealing my true connection to the Wright family. I was Claire Thompson, a business school graduate interested in specialty foods. My Wright past was buried under my new appearance, voice, and state, invisible but informing every move. At a sustainable business conference, I met Ben, a food industry angel investor with a passion for ethical business practices. Unlike Jason, Liam listened to me, his eyes lighting up as I explained my vision for a different kind of food company. Traditional food corporations exploit workers, consumers, and the environment, I said, thinking of my grandmother. Liam studied my business plan with growing excitement. This isn't just idealistic, it's strategically brilliant. You've identified real market gaps. I didn't tell him that Wright Delicacies had created or ignored those gaps. Every aspect of my Thompson Roots business plan was designed to succeed at their expense. Where Wright Delicacies was hierarchical, we will collaborate. Where they exploit suppliers, we will partner with them. Where they cut corners on quality to increase profits, we will prioritize integrity. After our third meeting, Liam offered to be your silent partner. You have the vision and drive. I have the capital and connections. 1 month later, Thompson Roots includes one employee, me, working out of a small commercial kitchen with my grandmother's journals open beside me as I recreated her recipes. However, I could already see the empire. It would be built to dismantle the house of Wright, brick by brick. They spent years making me invisible, but little did they know, invisibility had become my superpower. Thompson Roots grew organically, steadily, reaching for the light. Wright Delicacies relies on large-scale suppliers who provide lower-quality ingredients at volume discounts, so I built relationships with small Oregon farms to trace every ingredient in our jars. The farm-to-table model was ethical and strategic. I don't understand why you're bothering with these tiny operations, Liam said during our quarterly review. Consolidating suppliers would increase profit margins. Liam's eyes opened as I showed him our projected growth curve intersecting with Wright Delicacies' market share in exactly 3 years. Every jar we sell is one they don't. Every farm we partner with strengthens local agriculture, the opposite of Wright's industrialized approach. I replied that I preferred to think of it as justice with a business plan. Each decision I made served 2 purposes. When I chose eco-friendly packaging, it wasn't just to appeal to environmentally conscious consumers. Wright Delicacies had invested millions in proprietary plastic containers that were becoming unpopular with younger demographics. I prioritized fair wages and profit sharing for employees because Wright's notoriously high turnover caused quality control issues they struggled to address. I prioritized supply chain transparency by highlighting our farmers' names and stories on each label. Because Wright's hidden sourcing was becoming a liability in an age when consumers demanded authenticity. Our modest success in the Pacific Northwest might have continued if not for a chance encounter at a food industry conference in Seattle. I was presenting a session on sustainable business models when I noticed a woman in the back row watching me with unusual intensity. Her sharp gaze reminded me of someone, but I couldn't place who. She extended her hand shortly after. Kate. Impressive presentation. The name hit me like a physical blow. I kept my composure, shaking her hand with a smile that concealed my shock. Claire Thompson, thank you for coming. Your approach to ethical business is refreshing, she said. I've spent 10 years in corporate marketing watching companies pretend to care about sustainability while doing the bare minimum. I'd love to hear more about Thompson Roots. Catherine revealed she was Vanessa's older sister over coffee, though they hadn't spoken in years. My father groomed Vanessa to be the perfect political accessory, pretty, polished, and without principles. I refused to play that game and studied her, weighing risks and opportunities. What happened between you two? Catherine's expression darkened. I exposed my father's last senatorial race's questionable campaign finance practices, and Vanessa was furious. Not because he did anything wrong, but because I threatened the family image, which is all that matters to people like them. She paused, sipping her coffee. I hear she's engaged to a food industry heir. 2 weeks later, Katette became Thompson Roots marketing director. Her insider knowledge of how families like the Holtz and Wrights operated was invaluable. More importantly, she casually mentions Vanessa's activities with her fiancé Jason kept me informed of my ex-husband's life, without having to explain why. Vanessa called me unexpectedly yesterday. Catherine casually mentioned one afternoon as we reviewed packaging designs. Trying to mend fences, says she and Jason are having problems. He's drinking too much. The family business is struggling with new market pressures. I think she's realizing that marrying into money isn't all it seems. With Catherine's help, Thompson Roots launched a documentary series called From Soil to Table that streamed on our website and social media channels. Each episode covers a different aspect of ethical food production, sustainable farming, fair labor practices, and ingredient transparency. We didn't name Wright Delicacies because the contrast between our methods and theirs was implicit in every frame, every interview with happy farmers and workers, and every close-up of natural ingredients being transformed by traditional methods. The series went viral in food-conscious circles, earning features in culinary magazines and sustainability blogs. Each new follower and customer was another thread in the web I was weaving to entangle Right Delicacies. Since our success requires expansion, I targeted Right's strongest distribution areas: Boston, New York, Chicago. Each Thompson Roots jar on those shelves competes directly with Right products. Out East expansion is cutting deeper into operating capital than we projected. Liam warned during our fourth-year review, "Are you sure the Boston market is worth this level of investment?" I showed him the latest sales figures. Boston consumers are switching to our products at twice the rate of other markets. Trust me, this is exactly where we need to be. What I didn't tell Boston rollout. A blind taste test marketing campaign where consumers compared unlabeled preserves and voted for their favorite. My grandmother's blackberry sage preserve outperformed Right's by a large margin. My most satisfying strategy was also quite personal. I started our executive feedback program under the guise of market research when Thompson Roots expanded to the East Coast. We sent carefully curated gift baskets to influential food industry business leaders, including the Wright family, and received glowing feedback. Mark commented, "High quality and flavorful." Vivian commented, "Exquisite packaging and complex flavor characteristics. This would be appropriate for even the most discerning diners." Jason's comments were the most pleasing, superior to anything on the market. Right Delicacies should consider this a serious competitor. I kept those feedback forms in a special folder and read them on hard days when doubts crept in. They hadn't recognized my company name, and they wouldn't recognize me when we met again. Thompson Roots was still small compared to Right ones, but I had something they didn't. Intimate knowledge of their weaknesses, blind spots, and vulnerabilities, and nothing to lose. The spider's web was nearly complete. All that was left was to draw them in for the final confrontation at the National Food Innovation Gala, where industry leaders will network and showcase their latest products. They discarded me, believing I would fade into insignificance. This year, Thompson Roots was nominated for the Rising Star Award, which would put us on the main stage and ensure the Rights were seen when I took the microphone. I was ready for my moment of recognition 2 weeks before the National Food Innovation Gala. I had become their most dangerous opponent, one they didn't see coming until it was too late. Ray, Right Delicacies' largest investor, would speak at a sustainable business panel in Boston, so I made sure Thompson Roots sponsored the coffee break after his session. Lawrence was mid-60s, well-dressed, and had the sharp eyes of someone who made his fortune by seeing opportunities others missed. Mr. Barrett, Claire Thompson, founder of Thompson Roots. Your panel insights were fascinating. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. Thompson Roots, the preserves company from Oregon, correct? Impressive growth trajectory. You've been following our progress. I follow everything in specialty food, and he studied me with new interests. Your Rising Star nomination is well deserved. We talked about market trends and sustainability. Then I carefully addressed his investment portfolio. I know you invest heavily in Right Delicacies. I said their traditional approach dominates the market for decades. Barrett's expression changed at my use of past tense. Mark has built a remarkable legacy. Legacy is a powerful word. I agree, but I wonder if traditional companies can adapt quickly enough to changing consumer preferences. I shared market analysis data that directly highlights Right Delicacies' vulnerabilities without naming them. Barrett asked increasingly pointed questions. His concern was palpable. He suggested we continue this conversation over dinner next week, which I agreed to do, knowing he would be researching Thompson Roots and questioning his investment. Catherine burst into my office the next day, flushed with excitement. "You won't believe what my sister just told me. She's filing for divorce. Vanessa is leaving Jason because he's impossible to live with. Right Delicacies is in financial trouble. Jason is drinking heavily and Thomas is determined to change strategies despite falling market share." I keep my expression neutral. How unfortunate. Catherine leans forward conspiratorially. "Vanessa is already seeing someone else. Congressman Drew. She told me she needs to secure her future with someone who still does." The ruthless calculation was so Vanessa, so right adjacent, that I almost admired it. Jason had served his purpose in her life, just as I had in mine. The symmetry was poetic. You know what this means for our plan, right? Jason will be vulnerable, distracted. Perfect timing. I agreed. Our plan to acquire the Right Delicacies had just become much easier. The gala night arrived with perfect dramatic timing. A light snow fell over Boston as my car pulled up to the historic hotel venue. I stepped out wearing a blackberry-colored gown and my grandmother's locket with a small photo of her, my silent partner in this 7-year journey. The ballroom sparkled with crystal and ambition, as industry leaders worked over champagne, and screens displayed the nominated companies. Thompson Roots' promotional video played alongside those of much larger corporations, including Wright Delicacies. I saw them across the room. Thomas, older but still imposing. Vivian, elegant in midnight blue, surveying the crowd like a general. And Jason, handsome as ever, but with new lines around his eyes. Vanessa was absent. I moved carefully to avoid their gaze. Ray nodded meaningfully. Our dinner conversation had clearly had the desired effect. Phase 1 was complete. The Rising Star Award was announced midway through the evening. When they called Thompson Roots, applause erupted. Thompson Roots was founded on the simple idea that food should nourish not only our bodies but also our communities and planet. As I spoke about our journey, Ray approached Mark and whispered something in his ear. After the ceremony, I strategically moved until I met Jason. 7 years had changed us both, but while time had darkened his features, it had given me confidence. "Congratulations on your award," he said, his smile gone. "Impressive for such a new company." "Thank you, Jason," I replied, watching for recognition in his name. "Nothing. I believe business should be built on integrity, not just profits." He nodded absently, clearly not connecting this stranger with his past. I watched him leave satisfied. The real confrontation will come tomorrow in the Wright Delicacies boardroom. The next morning, I arrived on time for Ray's meeting with the Wrights. He told them about a potential investment opportunity. When I entered the boardroom, Mark looked confused. "Miss Thompson, I don't understand." I placed a folder on the table and explained Wright Delicacies' current position, and Thompson Roots' offer to acquire controlling interest. The room was shocked. Jason almost choked on coffee. "How silly. We're not selling to startups. Your company's market value has dropped 30% in 2 years, I said calmly. 3 key suppliers are considering contract breaks. Your core demographic is fading, and newer consumers perceive your brand antiquated and unethical. Thomas's face flushed with anger. "How could you possibly know about our supplier issues?" "The same way I know about your cash flow problems and the loans you've taken against your family estate," I replied. "Due diligence." Jason glared at Barrett. "This is a hostile takeover." "This is business," Barrett replied. Jason picked up the acquisition contract, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. "Sign it," Thomas ordered, his voice resigned. "We can't fight this." As Jason's pen hesitated over the signature line, I decided it was time. I removed my grandmother's locket and opened it to reveal her photo. "Know who you're selling to before signing," I added gently. Jason looked up, exasperated, then froze. He dropped the pen, spilling ink across the contract. "Claire." His voice whispered. "Hello, Jason. 7 years." Finally connecting the dots, Vivian gasped. "Impossible. I think your term was unworthy," I answered, my gaze unwavering. "Funny how things change." Jason signed the contract speechless. I moved another document forward as he returned it. A journal post by my grandmother concerning the stolen blackberry sage preserve recipe. I explained that Thompson Roots' success went beyond business strategy. Reclaiming what was stolen, especially my Nora's recipes that made Wright Delicacy famous. Thomas's face became pale as he read the recipe. He grasped his chest, laboring to breathe. Slander. "A documented fact," I corrected as Vivian ran to her husband. "Maybe call a doctor." As paramedics stabilized Thomas for a slight heart attack, I finalized acquisition paperwork. Thompson Roots owned Wright Specialties by midday. My last deed was probably the most personal. On that evening, I drove to the Wright estate, my company's property but where they might stay temporarily. I left a jar of blackberry sage preserve and handwritten delicacies wrapping with a Thompson Roots label on the doorstep. The handwritten note was reclaimed, not stolen, like my worth. 7 years earlier, I left with my name and honor. I returned to take everything else. Not for vengeance, but for justice for myself, my grandma, and everyone denied rights. In the game they started, I did what they never expected. Checkmate. Smash that like button now if this delicious vengeance narrative had you on edge. Thanks for watching and diving into this wild family drama with me. If you love Reddit family drama, Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.